Chapter 25:19, In the Property of the City Lord's Mansion. 2. Len Ruoxue thought of herself as a thrifty person, so she knew how to make good use of any resources. Besides, she had already robbed the Zhuohua City Lord's mansion, which was considered revenge. If she continued to cause him trouble, this guy might do something out of anger. By then, she would be in trouble. To put it bluntly, Len Ruoxue wanted to buy people's hearts. He would start with the Lord of Zhuohua City. At the thought of this, Len Ruoxue shifted her gaze to the evildoer and smiled, "Demon, let this guy be my bodyguard for the time being." "All right." The demon nodded his head unconditionally, then glared at Nether Sword and said, "From today onwards, you will stay by Shuai'er's side to protect her. If she loses even a single hair, I will hold you responsible." "Yes." Upon hearing this, Nether Sword hurriedly replied despite his reluctance. At the same time, he heaved a sigh of relief, because this meant that his lord would no longer pursue his crimes. With that, he was relieved. But in fact, he was relieved a little too early. This was because the demon was the same as Len Ruoxue. They would only record his crimes first. If he performed well, his past crimes would naturally be written off. If he did not perform well, it would be adding to his crimes. Unfortunately, the current Nether Sword thought that he had just escaped from death and naturally didn't think of this. Len Ruoxue was in a good mood after taking in another underling. She then passed a name list to Nether Sword. Nether Sword looked at the name list in his hand, his face full of question marks. The name list was filled with the names of some forces, and most of them were the city lords of small cities. He did not understand why Len Ruoxue had given him this. With a smile, Len Ruoxue took the initiative to clarify, "These guys tried to rob us on our way to Zhuohua City, but we robbed them instead. Now, what we need to do is to collect money. You lead the way." Hearing this, Nether Sword's face was filled with black lines. He didn't expect that his first job would be to rob, and many of the names on the list were city lords of small cities under his command. What should he do? Rejected? That was absolutely impossible. If his lord knew that he didn't listen to this woman's orders, he would probably be furious again. Sob. The helpless Nether Sword accepted the job with tears in his eyes. When Len Ruoxue and the rest saw this, they were elated. With Nether Sword as their helper, they could go out and play. Just like that, Nether Sword and his subordinates formed Len Ruoxue's exclusive team to collect mental damage compensation. The team leader was naturally Nether Sword. Every day, they would run from city to city to collect mental damage compensation for Len Ruoxue and the others, while Len Ruoxue and the others would wait for them at a certain place. After they collected the mental damage compensation for a region, they would set off together. However, it was a pity that they could never finish collecting the money from the Nether Swords. After they had collected a batch, another batch of forces would come to ambush Len Ruoxue and the others. The consequences would be dire. Therefore, every time Nether Sword and the others came back to pay, they would have a new target waiting for them. Just like that, a month passed. Nether Sword and the rest had almost run through the entire 9 Nether prison. Naturally, there were fewer and fewer forces that dared to have designs on Len Ruoxue and the rest. However, the actions of Nether Sword and the rest had also attracted the attention of a few other city lords. However, Nether Sword's actions were still considered secretive, so the identity of the monster was not exposed. The organizations that had been robbed were even more tight-lipped about this matter. Just like that, even when Len Ruoxue and the rest arrived at 9 Serenity City, the other city lords still had no idea what had happened. Thanks however, Len Ruoxue finally understood why so many factions came to find trouble with her when she sent Nether Sword to collect money from the factions that had attacked them. The reason could only be described in 4 words: greed and selfishness. The powers that had been robbed were selfish and hoped that they could have more brothers who were in the same boat as them. Hence, after they were robbed, they acted as if nothing had happened and kept their suffering in their stomachs. On the other hand, the powers that had not been robbed were greedy and coveted the identities of Len Ruoxue and the others. Of course, their ending would definitely be tragic. However, it was also because of their greed that Leng Ruoxue had earned so much. When they arrived at Jiuyou City, Leng Ruoxue and the rest were like Granny Lu entering the Grand View Garden. They looked here and there. One could not blame them for being so curious. Jiuyou City was simply too different from other cities. If Leng Ruoxue had not known that this was Jiuyou City, she would have thought that they had already returned to the firmament. The quality of the people in Jiuyou City was obviously above that of the other cities. Even though the meditating cultivators in the city were curious about their identities, they all watched from afar. No one dared to come forward and cause trouble, except for a few people whose eyes would flash with a hint of greed from time to time. In general, Leng Ruoxue was quite satisfied with their performance. However, Leng Ruoxue also knew that the reason why the people in Jiuyou City behaved in such a way, other than their own strength being much stronger than those in other cities, was also because Ming Ziyi and Ming Jian were by their side. However, Leng Ruoxue's thoughts were completely different from those of Jiuyou City. Leng Ruoxue thought that the two city lords had intimidated the people here, but in reality, they were treated as the exclusive property of Jiuyou City Lord Manor. Who would dare to touch the property of the city lord's mansion? Wasn't that courting death? It was precisely because of this preconceived notion that Leng Ruoxue and the others were not surrounded by too many people. After walking around the city, the demon brought Leng Ruoxue and the rest to the city lord's residence. Jiuyou City Lord's mansion was located in the southwest of Jiuyou City. It occupied a large area, taking up almost one-third of Jiuyou City. This did not include the mountains around the city lord's mansion. Otherwise, the area would be even larger. When they entered the city lord's residence, Leng Ruoxue and the rest did not even have the time to take a good look at the scenery of the residence before they noticed a black mass of men in black kneeling on the ground. "Greetings, my lord." The leader of the men in black kneeled in front said. There was a slight tremble in his voice, and it was obvious that he was overly excited. Get up." The demon nodded slightly. The man in black stood up and looked at Leng Ruoxue and the rest. He bowed respectfully and said, "Greetings, Miss Leng." This time, they did not kneel. They had already heard from Ruji that Leng Ruoxue didn't like people kneeling before her. In addition, her identity hadn't been confirmed yet, so they naturally couldn't call her the Nether Empress. Leng Ruoxue nodded her head slightly and looked at the demon. The demon pulled Leng Ruoxue into his arms and explained, "He is the chief guard and head butler of the Jiuyou City Master's mansion. In the future, if you need anything, just tell him. This subordinate will obey Miss Leng's orders." Hearing his lord say this, the butler in black said with a hint in his eyes. "All right, then I won't stand on ceremony." Leng Ruoxue said with a smile. She had a pretty good impression of the head butler. After a simple meeting with his subordinates, the evildoer brought Leng Ruoxue and the rest to his main hall. Chapter 25-20, the property of the city lord's mansion. 3. The main hall of the Jiuyou City Master's mansion looked very ordinary from the outside. It was mainly dark gold in color and was filled with a strong domineering aura. When Leng Ruoxue first saw this hall, she looked at the demon for a long time, but she couldn't see any substantial connection between the demon and this hall. It wasn't that evildoer wasn't domineering enough, it was just that the impression he had always given her was too much of an evildoer, so she really couldn't imagine what he had been like in the past. In addition, the monster had disappeared into thin air ever since he arrived at the Jiuyou City Master's mansion. However, he didn't disappear completely. He just didn't appear by her side often. This fact caused Leng Ruoxue to be suspicious. After arriving at the Jiuyou City Lord's mansion, Tsang could finally move freely. The defense here was the strongest in the entire 9 Nether prison, so Azure felt that it could do whatever it wanted. However, it had still underestimated its destructive ability. After it destroyed a guest house of the Jiuyou City Master's residence, it immediately became the main target of surveillance for everyone in the Jiuyou City Master's residence. Usually, once it appeared, the guards would immediately report to Leng Ruoxue that their pet had gone missing. As a result, Azure couldn't do anything. Leng Ruoxue watched it closely, not allowing it to act rashly. After all, this was her man's property. On a certain day, Leng Ruoxue sat in the courtyard, bored to death, and chatted with Nether Sword. After she asked him countless boring questions that almost made Nether Sword break down, she suddenly asked, "Where's the demon?" "His lord has gone up," Nether Sword was about to answer reflexively, but after saying a few words, he immediately reacted and changed his words in annoyance. "I'm busy with work." "Really?" Leng Ruoxue squinted her beautiful eyes and asked indifferently. "Yes." Nether Sword nodded and didn't dare to say another word in case he spilled the beans. "Girl, don't listen to him. That bad guy isn't busy with work at all. He went to see another woman." At this moment, Sung, who had been lying in Leng Ruoxue's arms, suddenly shouted. "Ah!" When Nether Sword heard this, he immediately broke out in a cold sweat. "Someone is talking bad about you, come back quickly." He deeply felt that he could not hold on any longer. He went to see other women. The demon has other women? The moment Leng Ruoxue heard this, her face turned black as she asked. "No, Master doesn't have any other women." Nether Sword said with a long face. Then he really went to see another woman? Leng Ruoxue caught on to the inappropriateness of Nether Sword's words and asked. This, Nether Sword was very worried. How was he supposed to answer this? Because his lord had really gone to see another woman, but that couldn't be considered a meeting, right? But he couldn't say this to the woman in front of him, because his lord didn't allow it. What's this? Aren't you going to tell me the truth? Leng Ruoxue raged as her beautiful eyes shot towards Nether Sword. Miss Leng, I don't have anything to explain. His lord really went out because of work, what do you want me to say? Nether Sword was on the verge of tears. It's fine if you don't want to tell me. When the demon returns, I'll tell him that you tried to molest me when he wasn't around. Leng Ruoxue laughed evilly. Thanks, that's right, girl, just say that he also molested me. Tsung followed up with a roar. Hearing the threat from the man and the beast, Nether Sword even felt like dying. Sob. Don't bully people like this, okay? His lord's nose was not his nose, and his eyes were not his eyes. If he was wronged and molested by this person again, would he have a good life? Furthermore, if he was accused of molesting Leng Ruoxue, perhaps some people would believe him. However, he would not be so thirsty that he would not even let a beastie off, right? With his brief understanding of the master and the beast, Nether Sword didn't know whether he should accept his fate or not, because he couldn't afford to offend either of them. They were really too detestable. Just as the Nether Sword was feeling sad, a melodious female voice suddenly burst into his ears, Big Brother Jian, where are you? Hearing this voice, Nether Sword quivered. Why was she here? He looked at Leng Ruoxue, then at the fiery red figure that ran in from outside. Nether Sword felt his head throb. As for the red figure, it pounced into Nether Sword's arms as if there was no one around. Seeing this, Leng Ruoxue only raised her brows in surprise, but tactfully remained silent. However, Ro Ji, who was standing beside her, had flames of anger in her eyes when she saw the woman in red. Leng Ruoxue could more or less guess the woman's identity. Floating jade? Looking at this woman's appearance, she was indeed a rare beauty. Moreover, she was very suited for red. The red on her body was like a flame, making people feel her incomparable enthusiasm. More importantly, the clothes of the 9 Nether prison were mostly dark colors, usually black or gray-blue. This woman was wearing a rare red dress, so her status in the 9 Nether prison should not be low. Just as Leng Ruoxue was making her own conjectures, Nether Sword awkwardly pulled away from Piao Yao and asked, Piao Yao, why are you here? Can't I come? Big Brother brought me here. Piao Yao said unhappily. Minga is also here. Nether Sword was very surprised. That guy had always lived in seclusion and rarely left his main city. Why had he suddenly come to Jiuyo City? Could it be because of that? Not only that, the city lords of the 10 major cities have all arrived. Piao Yao said. This time, Nether Sword was even more surprised. However, it was obvious that he was thinking too much. The city lords of the 10 major cities did not gather here for a certain matter at all. They had heard the news of his lord's return, so they had collectively come here just to see his lord. Who would have thought that they would come up empty? Their lord wasn't even in the city lord's residence. When Piao Yao heard that their lord had brought back a woman, she specially came over to see Leng Ruoxue. She had ignored everyone else and only looked at Nether Sword on purpose. It was also an act for Leng Ruoxue to see. Brother Jian, the city lords of the 10 major cities are all here. Aren't you going to meet them? What's going on? Asked Piao Yao gently when she saw that Nether Sword was rather shocked to hear that the city lords of the 10 major cities had arrived. Nether Sword was a little hesitant. His main task was to protect Leng Ruoxue. Although that valiant woman didn't need his protection at all, he couldn't neglect his duty. Moreover, he understood Piao Yao's personality too well. If he left, he really didn't know what Piao Yao would do. So, he really didn't dare to let these two women be together so easily. The Nether Sword was very conflicted. If it wasn't for Piao Yao, he wouldn't have dared to leave Leng Ruoxue for the sake of his own life. At this moment, he heard Leng Ruoxue's smile. Big brother Jian, you should go and meet your little companions. I'll take care of myself. Isn't Ruji here? Hearing the words, Big Brother Sword, Nether Sword immediately got goosebumps. He never knew why these 3 words sounded more and more like a death warrant. If her master knew that the future Nether Empress had called him Big Brother Sword, would she kill him in a fit of anger? Chapter 25-21, In the Property of the City Lord's Mansion. For, Miss Leng, please don't call me Big Brother Sword, Ming Jian begged, trembling. He really couldn't stand it. Then should I call you Bitch Brother? Leng Ruoxue blinked her beautiful eyes and asked with an innocent look. All right. Nether Sword knew that the 3 words that came out of Leng Ruoxue's mouth had a completely different meaning from Piao Yao's. This detestable woman was clearly calling him cheap. Do you think I can't tell? Slut brother sounds good, slut brother, quickly go and do your work. It's good that I'm here to accompany Miss Leng. Ruji also drove him away with a smile. Ugh. Now, Nether Sword was even more worried. Although there was a saying that 3 women made a show, there was no way these 3 women could live in peace. However, he didn't have much time to think. Uncle Long had already walked over and put his arm around Nether Sword's shoulder. Let's go. Take us to see the other city lords of the 10 major cities. With that, Uncle Long and the others escorted Nether Sword out of the hall without waiting for him to agree. As soon as the crowd left, Piao Yao, who was originally as gentle as water, immediately turned her eyes to Leng Ruoxue and shouted, Where did this lowly commoner come from, not kneeling upon seeing this princess? Hearing this, Leng Ruoxue's beautiful eyes turned to Ruji. With an innocent look, she asked, Ruji, what is this woman talking about? You're farting. Miss Leng, you don't need to pay attention to it. Ruji didn't even look at Piao Yao and directly said. Ruji, you're so bold. You dare to offend your superior. Hearing Ruji's words, Piao Yao said with hatred. Insubordination. Do you think this is the 9 Mist Mansion? Ruji laughed coldly. In the past, she might have been afraid of Piao Yao's identity. But now, if she were to be apprehensive, wouldn't she be weakening Leng Ruoxue's imposing manner? Although this isn't the 9 Mist Mansion, I'm the princess of the 9 Mist City. You're just a lowly commoner, yet you dare to be rude to me. This is insubordination. Piao Yao roared righteously. Lady Piao Yao, you can be a princess in the 9 Mist Mansion, but there's no princess here. So you'd better behave yourself. Otherwise, you won't even know how you died. Ruji said sarcastically. Ruji. How dare you threaten me? Men. Capture Ruji and let her be punished. Piao Yao shouted in anger. She had wanted to show Leng Ruoxue her strength, but who knew that Ruji alone would be enough to make her so angry? If she didn't let them know how powerful she was, wouldn't her title as the #1 princess and beauty of 9 Nether prison be just for show? After hearing Piao Yao's words, Ro Ji just smiled faintly and looked at her with ridicule. One should know that this was the territory of the Master of the Dark World. If anyone dared to break into the Master of the Dark World to capture someone, they would be courting death. As expected, for a long time after Piao Yao's words fell, no guard came in. Immediately, Piao Yao's face was a little embarrassed. Damn it! It was fine if she couldn't order the guards of the city lord's mansion, but why didn't her own guards listen to her? Piao Yao was furious and shouted a few more times, "Men! Men!" Who knew that there were still no guards who came in? When Piao Yao saw this, she was instantly enraged. Thanks without a second thought, she pulled out the whip from her waist and swung it at Ruji. After Ruji calmly dodged the black whip, it suddenly changed its direction and flew towards Len Ruoxue. Ruji was instantly shocked. Piao Yao's whip wasn't an ordinary whip. If it really hit a person, even if they didn't die, they would be seriously injured. Therefore, when she saw the whip change direction, her heart was in her throat. However, before she could rush over to protect Len Ruoxue, she saw the whip in Piao Yao's hand catch fire. After that, Piao Yao screamed again and again. The moment Len Ruoxue saw the whip, her beautiful eyes narrowed. The weapon she hated the most was a whip, and the person she hated the most was a woman holding a whip. Hence, Len Ruoxue could not find a reason to let this reckless woman off, especially when this woman wanted to kill two birds with one stone. She had even less reason to let her off. It was precisely because of this that Piao Yao's life was in a tragedy. And all of this happened so quickly that no one could guard against it. Not long after the tragedy happened, a black figure suddenly flew past Len Ruoxue's side and ran to Piao Yao's side. He helped to put out the fire in a flurry. Len Ruoxue could also feel that there were a few more people by her side. However, she didn't even turn her head. She just calmly watched a black-clothed man busy for Piao Yao. Was her fire so easily extinguished? In just a short while, Piao Yao's whip was burned to ashes and the flames began to spread from Piao Yao's arm to her body. Piao Yao had long fainted from the pain. Seeing that the fire was getting bigger, the man in black who was putting out the fire shouted anxiously, "Why aren't you guys coming over to help?" However, no one moved after hearing his words. Ming Ji. Piao Yao is your little sister, are you going to leave her in the lurch? The man in black roared angrily. These people were really too heartless. Piao Yao was already like this, yet they still didn't lend a hand and only knew how to watch the show from the side. She asked for it. A cold male voice rang out from behind Len Ruoxue. Nether Sword, you're not going to help either. Hearing Ming Ji's words, the black-clothed man had no choice but to raise his voice and ask about Floating Jade's other flower guardian. When Nether Sword heard this, he had mixed feelings in his heart. It was not that he did not want to help. It was just that he could not afford to offend Len Ruoxue. That woman's flames were very powerful. Unless she was willing to retract them herself, no one would be able to extinguish them. This secret was only known to him after he had asked around. Most importantly, he knew that Len Ruoxue wasn't an unreasonable woman. Piao Yao was most likely the cause of this incident, so it wasn't even a matter of whether he would help her or not. As the saying goes, Xia Ling still had to be a Ling person. Unless Len Ruoxue was willing to let Piao Yao go, none of them would be able to help her. AI. At this moment, he was filled with regret. He knew that these three women couldn't get along at all. Great, something had happened. However, it was a good thing that Len Ruoxue was not the one who was in trouble. Otherwise, he would have to die to atone for his sins. Seeing that Nether Sword didn't even respond, the man in black who was busy putting out the fire immediately became angry and shouted again, "Nether Sword, you've truly disappointed me. To think that Piao Yao likes you so much. Is the person she likes me?" Nether Sword couldn't help but sneer coldly in his heart. Did he not know that the reason why Piao Yao was willing to deal with him was because he was willing to spend money on her and satisfy her vanity? Furthermore, after seeing how Ling Ruoxue and his lord interacted, he suddenly felt that everything he had done for Piao Yao in the past was too foolish and not worth it. Therefore, he no longer wanted to be a man who was at the mercy of a woman. It was as simple as that. My mission is to protect Miss Lang. After some thought, Nether Sword said very implicitly. What's there to protect her for? It's just the property of the city lord's mansion, so why don't we just lock it up? The man in black roared in exasperation. Chapter 25-22, Searching for her husband 1,000 miles, 1, in the property of the city lord's mansion. Hearing this, Ling Ruoxue blinked her beautiful eyes and turned to ask Nether Sword. No, how could you be the property of the city lord's mansion? Hearing this, Nether Sword was so scared that he shook his head. Ming Xing was a reckless person. How could he dare to speak to Ling Ruoxue in such a manner? Although he had heard some rumors that some people in Jiuyou City indeed felt that Ling Ruoxue was the property of the city lord's estate, no one dared to tell Ling Ruoxue about this. Now, it was all good. They could no longer hide it. Furthermore, from Ling Ruoxue's tone, Ming Xing was probably in for some bad luck. As expected, after Nether Sword's words, Ling Ruoxue stared at him with her beautiful eyes for a full 5 minutes. Although it was only a short 5 minutes, Nether Sword's shamelessness was enough to cause Ling Ruoxue to break out in cold sweat. The pressure this girl gave him was as heavy as a mountain. At this moment, he wished he could kneel down in front of this queen-like ancestor and beg her to stop staring at him. Sob. He was innocent, very innocent. As if she had read Ming Jian's mind, Ling Ruoxue turned her beautiful eyes to Ming Xing, who was busy extinguishing the fire, after staring at him for a long time. You said in the property of the city lord's mansion. Miss Lang, didn't I already say that you're not? Hearing this, Nether Sword quickly expressed his opinion. Who knew that Ling Ruoxue wouldn't even give him a good look? She even said with a dark expression, I'm not asking you. Ah. Nether Sword was depressed. He was not being trusted. I don't have time to answer you. Ming Xing, who was busy extinguishing the flames on Piao Yao's body, said without giving her any face. If you tell me, it'll help you put out the fire on this woman. Ling Ruoxue stated her conditions. Put out the fire first. Ming Xing was not stupid. All right. Ling Ruoxue's heart stirred slightly. The flames on Piao Yao's body seemed to have received an order and flew away from her. Nether Sword and the others who were watching could not help but widen their eyes in shock. This was too magical. Seeing that the fire on Piao Yao's body was finally appeased, Ming Xing quickly took out another elixir and stuffed it into Piao Yao's mouth. Then, he stood up and looked at Ling Ruoxue. You deities, since you've come to the city lord's mansion, you're already publicly acknowledged as the property of the city lord. Otherwise, do you think you can live so freely? You can do this because the power of the Jiuyou City Master's mansion has protected you. So, you'd better behave yourself. This is not your divine world. Anyone who dares to bully our people in the 9 Nether prison's territory will become the enemy of the entire 9 Nether prison. After he finished speaking, he didn't even give Ling Ruoxue a chance to react before he picked up Piao Yao in a carefree manner and turned to leave without any reluctance. Who is that person? Ling Ruoxue asked Ruji after walking in the dark. It's the city master of 9 Nether City. Ruji said honestly. Compared to the Jiuhua City Lord, the Jiuming City Lord was Piao Yao's most loyal and diehard protector. He never said anything to Piao Yao and helped her solve many things or people that she didn't like. In addition, he was Piao Yao's biggest financial backer. In comparison, what the Jiuhua City Lord did for Piao Yao was child's play. This was also the main reason why Ming Xing was so nervous when he saw the scene just now, but Ming Jian was not. Thanks, so he's the greatest adulterer of the number 1 beauty. Ling Ruoxue came to a sudden realization. Then, her beautiful eyes glanced at Ming Jian teasingly, causing him to break out in a cold sweat. It's every woman's dream to have a man who is so loyal to her, Ling Ruoxue mumbled to herself. Upon hearing this, the city lords present did not know how to respond. This did not seem to be a problem. However, they had finally seen the true face of this young Lady Leng. As expected, she was not comparable to Piao Yao. No wonder his lord had personally brought her back. Among the 10 great main cities' city lords, there were quite a few who had a good relationship with Nether Sword. Thus, he was afraid that they did not understand how important Leng Ruoxue was to his lord, so he had specially informed them of Leng Ruoxue's relationship with his lord. He did not want them to accidentally provoke that demon. However, he didn't say how terrifying Leng Ruoxue was. This was a matter of his face, so he naturally couldn't reveal it easily. However, he had also said in his words that this woman wasn't to be trifled with and told them not to provoke her. As for the rest, they could only feel it for themselves. Fortunately, most of the city lords were calm and rational. They would not be affected by Piao Yao's matter. However, Ming Xing was a huge problem. Thinking of Ming Xing, Ming Jian decided to let him have less contact with Leng Ruoxue in the future to avoid trouble. It was a pity that even though he had thought of it, things would not go according to his script. Before they could even introduce themselves to Leng Ruoxue, Ming Xing had already returned in a huff. Seeing Ming Xing's expression, Ming Jian's heart skipped a beat. Damn it! What was this bastard doing? Hand over the medicine. Ming Xing walked straight to Leng Ruoxue and extended his hand. What medicine? Leng Ruoxue blinked her eyes and pretended to be confused. A healing pill. Don't tell me you didn't. Ming Xing roared angrily. Although he had never been to the deity world, he had heard from the Muley City master that healing elixirs and the like were all common elixirs for deities. Hence, when he saw that Leng Ruoxue was feigning ignorance, he was even more furious. I do, but why should I give it to you? Leng Ruoxue asked in bewilderment. You injured Piao Yao, shouldn't you take out a healing pill as compensation? Ming Xing said through gritted teeth. He didn't expect such a beautiful woman to have such a vicious heart. A woman's heart was truly the most vicious. In an instant, Leng Ruoxue had become a synonym for evil in Ming Xing's heart. She was the representative of a venomous beauty. However, it was fortunate that Leng Ruoxue was still unclear of Ming Xing's thoughts. Otherwise, she would have been depressed to death. However, at this moment, Leng Ruoxue laughed after hearing Ming Xing's words, City Lord of 9 Nether City, it wasn't my intention to injure Princess Piao Yao. I was merely acting in self-defense. What a good self-defense. Then why was Piao Yao the one who was injured and not a single hair on you was injured? You're courting death. Ming Xing roared in anger. He looked at Leng Ruoxue with a burning gaze. If looks could kill, Leng Ruoxue would have been dead by now. I can only say that Princess Piao Yao's skill is inferior to hers. Leng Ruoxue smiled faintly. These words successfully made Ming Xing's expression turn even uglier. Following that, without giving Ming Xing a chance to speak, Leng Ruoxue changed the topic and said, It's not that you can't get the healing pill, but you have to answer a few of my questions truthfully. What's the problem? When Ming Xing saw that Leng Ruoxue had finally relented and was willing to give him healing pills, he could only suppress his anger and ask, if it wasn't for the fact that his healing elixir didn't have much effect on Piao Yao, he wouldn't have come to find this woman. However, in this situation, he had no choice but to bow his head. Chapter 25-23, Searching for her husband 1,000 miles away. 2. Ming Xing, don't trouble young Lady Leng. I have the healing pill you want. Let's go and see Piao Yao. Hearing the conversation between the two, the uneasy Nether Sword grabbed Ming Xing's shoulder and dragged him away. As soon as Nether Sword and his companion left, Ming Ji and the others also chose to leave. They had come here to meet their lord. Since their lord was not around, it was not good for them to disturb him. Moreover, if their lord knew that they had met Leng Ruoxue in private, with his protective personality, he might make things difficult for them. The city lords were all smart people, so they would not make such a low-level mistake. Therefore, they only got to know Leng Ruoxue and left without much interaction. After they left, Leng Ruoxue asked Ro Ji about the city lords. After learning that one of them was Pieo's brother, Len Ruoshua looked at Roji in surprise. Seeing this, Roji could only answer her question, the relationship between the siblings isn't good. Young Lady Leng, the development model of our clan in the Nine Nether prison is a little different from that of your divine realm. In your divine realm, the clansmen rely on the clan, but here, it is the exact opposite. If a clan has a city lord appointed by Joyo City, then that person's position in the clan will immediately become supreme, and the clan will also benefit from it. On the contrary, if a clansman makes Joyo City unhappy, then the clan he's from will also be implicated. This is also the main reason why many clans choose to turn a blind eye to the trouble caused by their clansmen. No family can bear this kind of loss, and in order for the family to survive in the Nine Nether prison, the competition between the families is extremely fierce. Over time, it formed a unique way of survival for the family. It can be said that his lordship has the absolute ruling position in the Nine Nether prison, and everything in the prison belongs to the Dark Lord. Ruji paused for a moment before explaining to Len Ruoshua. I see. Len Ruoshua nodded. She didn't expect this demon to have such means. The Nine Nether prison's territory was actually his. As for the relationship between Piao Yao and her sister. In the past, Mingsong City Master's status in the family was not high. However, by chance, he was chosen by the master and accepted as a subordinate. Later, he became the city master with his own strength. From then on, Mingsong City Master's status in the family became supreme. The clansmen who used to look down on him had to rely on his charity to show off in Nine Nether prison. Piao Yao was one of the clansmen who looked down on Mingsong City Master, and she was one of the more intense ones. It's only natural that they have a cold relationship with each other. Since they had nothing to do, Roji continued to tell Len Ruoshua about the gossip of the Minga family. If that's the case, then how can Piao Yao's days in the divine world still be so comfortable? This made Len Ruoshua extremely curious. Of course, it's because Ming Ge is too lazy to pay attention to her. Besides, she has a beautiful face, so she will naturally be protected by some lecherous people in the Nine Nether prison. However, this has a lot to do with the fact that City Lord Ming Song has never told anyone about the grudges between the siblings. So, for the sake of City Lord Ming Song, many people are not willing to offend Piao Yao. When Roji said this, her beautiful face was filled with anger. If Piao Yao hadn't taken advantage of her, she wouldn't have been so easily framed by that bitch. After hearing Roji's story, Len Ruoshua finally understood the complicated relationship between the city lords in the Netherworld prison. She couldn't help but laugh when she saw the angry look on Roji's face when she talked about the floating jade gossip. However, she didn't comfort Ruji. Instead, she mysteriously arranged for Ruji to rest while she continued to sit in the courtyard, waiting for an opportunity. As for which rabbit she would be able to guard, it would depend on which rabbit was stupid. Late at night, a black-robed man who was hidden in the night carefully sneaked into Len Ruoxua's courtyard. However, the moment he entered the courtyard, he saw Len Ruoxua sitting in the middle of the courtyard, looking at him with a smile. He was shocked. Thanks, I was waiting for you. You're so slow. Len Ruoxua answered honestly. This time, it was the black-clothed man's turn to be depressed. He wanted to come earlier, but he had to get rid of the nether sword. Moreover, if he came early, what would he do if the guards of the city lord's mansion found out? What if Len Ruoxua found out? However, Len Ruoxua still found out that he had arrived too late. The fact that he was waiting for him in the courtyard made the man in black feel extremely defeated. You knew I would come. The man in black couldn't believe that the other party could actually see through his thoughts and asked, unwilling to give up. I knew you would come to me for healing pills. The healing pills you have can't cure Piao Yao's injuries. Len Ruoxua said with a look of certainty. You're right. What do I have to do for you to give me the healing pill? The man in black asked while holding back his anger. It was impossible to force the woman to hand over the pill. Therefore, he could only negotiate with her in case the other party called for help when the two sides disagreed. If that happened, he might be wanted by the guards of the entire city lord's mansion. He didn't dare to take the risk. Answer a few of my questions. Leng Ruoxue said with a smile. It's only that simple. The man in black couldn't believe it. What else did you think? That's right, Piao Yao also called me a lowly commoner. This time, I'll let her off for the sake of Ming Song City Master. If there's a next time, don't blame me for being ruthless. Leng Ruoxue said indifferently. However, the man in black didn't take Leng Ruoxue's words to heart. At this moment, all his thoughts were on the few questions that Leng Ruoxue wanted to ask. He didn't know what she would ask, so he really didn't have any confidence. You can ask now. The man in black said with determination. Where did your mistress go? Leng Ruoxue asked directly. When the man in black heard this question, he widened his eyes in surprise. He never thought that Leng Ruoxue would actually want to know about this. Was this question very difficult? Initially, he thought that Leng Ruoxue would ask him some tricky questions that would be difficult for him to answer. Who knew that she only wanted to know where the mistress of the dark world had gone? It seemed like the mistress of the dark world didn't tell her before she left. With this thought, the man in black was even more disdainful of Leng Ruoxue. It seemed like this woman didn't hold a high position in the Dark Lord's heart like what Nethersword had said. In his heart, he felt that the mistress of the dark world didn't even tell her where she was, so she naturally didn't care about her. Therefore, he didn't even think about it and replied, the Lord went to the Dead Sea for inspection. The Dead Sea? Leng Ruoxue frowned. Even though she knew where the evildoer had gone, when she heard his name, she only thought of trouble. If it wasn't for the fact that the Death Sea was in trouble, the demon wouldn't have personally come out and would not have told her about it. Could it be that the trouble there was very dangerous? Chapter 25-24, Searching for her husband 1,000 miles away. 3. In a few short seconds, Leng Ruoxue's mind was spinning. She then asked, where is the Dead Sea? Ha ha ha. The Dead Sea is at the northernmost part of the 9 Nether prison. It has a low temperature all year round and the climate is harsh. It's not a place where people can stay at all. At the same time, there are many extremely evil and heinous wanted criminals in the 9 Nether prison. Simply put, it's quite dangerous there. Why, do you want to go there? When the man in black spoke of the Dead Sea, he did not hide the disgust in his heart. As long as one was mentally sound, no one would be willing to go there. The last sentence was a provocation to Leng Ruoxue. He believed that after hearing his introduction of the Dead Sea, this woman would be scared out of her wits and would not dare to go there. Gods were food there. How can I not go to such a special place? Leng Ruoxue became even calmer when she heard the man in black's ill intentions. You really dare to go? The man in black couldn't stay calm anymore. This woman. Did this woman not want to live? If she really went there, she would definitely be like a meat bun that had been thrown at a dog and would never return. Not only would the wanted criminals hiding in the Death Sea not let her off, even the Lord of the Death Sea would want to take her for himself. That place wasn't like Joyo City, which was absolutely safe. I've grown up, but I still don't know how to write the word fear. Leng Ruoxue said confidently. Upon hearing this, even the man in black, who did not like Leng Ruoxue anymore, could not help but look up to her. This woman was too bold. Seeing that she had finally managed to intimidate Ming Xing, Leng Ruoxue continued, prepare a map to the Death Sea for me. Also, you have to cooperate with me to leave the city lord's mansion. Only then will you be able to get the healing elixir that you want. All right. After some thought, Ming Xing agreed. In his heart, Piao Yao's life was much more important than Leng Ruoxue's. In the following days, be it Leng Ruoxue or Ming Xing, both of them were extremely quiet. After they had finished discussing their conditions, they did not disturb each other. Leng Ruoxue simply walked around in the courtyard, while Ming Xing stayed by the unconscious Piao Yao's side. The two's behavior put Nethersword at ease. Who knew that just as Nether Sword felt at ease, he received news of Leng Ruoxue and the others' disappearance the next day. This news shocked Ming Jian so much that he couldn't react for a long time. When he finally reacted, he hurriedly went to find Ming Xing and saw that the unconscious Piao Yao had already woken up. What else did he not understand? When Piao Yao saw Nether Sword, she thought that he had come to visit her. Just as she was about to act coquettishly with him, she saw the furious Nether Sword punch at Ming Xing while shouting in an unusually angry voice, "You bastard, do you know what you've done?" At this moment, Ming Jian only thought that Ming Xing had told Leng Ruoxue about his master's whereabouts, which was why she had run away from home after searching for her husband. If he knew that Leng Ruoxue's successful escape from the heavily guarded city lord's residence was partly due to Ming Xing, he would probably be even angrier. I only did what I should have done. Ming Xing dodged Nether Sword's fist and said matter-of-factly. You idiot, I'm telling you, if anything happens to Leng Ruoxue, well, I'll be in trouble. The Lord will not let us go, do you know that? Nether Sword Fire roared. Thanks, he was left behind in the city lord's residence. On the surface, he was there to protect Leng Ruoxue, but in reality, he was there to monitor her and prevent her from leaving the city lord's residence. He especially forbade her from heading to the Dead Sea after finding out where his lord was. But now, Leng Ruoxue's whereabouts were unknown. He did not dare to imagine how furious his lord would be if Leng Ruoxue were to lose even a single hair. The consequences would be too terrifying. She left on her own, what does it have to do with us? Ming Xing was still disapproving. You want to tell the Lord this? Do you think His Majesty will believe you? Nether Sword roared with a face full of disappointment. At this moment, Piao Yao also understood the reason why the two of them were fighting. She knew that Leng Ruoxue and the rest had left the city lord's mansion. She could not help but feel proud in her heart. That woman really could not stay here any longer. It was good that she had left. Big Brother Jian, didn't that woman leave on her own? Why are you blaming Brother Xing? It's not Brother Xing's fault. Suppressing the joy in her heart, Piao Yao, with an expression that she couldn't bear to watch, self-righteously tried to uphold justice. You shut up. You idiot, it's all because of you, do you know that? Hearing her words, Nether Sword's anger increased instead of decreasing. As for Piao Yao, who had never been yelled at by him before, hearing that Nether Sword was actually scolding her, she immediately put on an expression of being wronged. Why are you blaming Yao Yao? Ming Xing asked, his heart aching. She's not the one who chased Leng Ruoxue away. You're really hopeless. Ming Xing's words caused Ming Jian to reveal an expression of disappointment. This idiot. If it wasn't to save Piao Yao, why would he tell Leng Ruoxue about my lord's whereabouts and let her find a chance to leave the city lord's mansion? In order to protect Leng Ruoxue, his lord had arranged for many layers of defense, especially the restriction at the door. To prevent Leng Ruoxue from leaving stealthily, his lord had even added a trace of his divine sense. The moment Leng Ruoxue touched it, his lord would immediately detect it. So, unless there was a traitor, Leng Ruoxue would not be able to escape. However, the furious Nether Sword did not expect that Ming Xing was the traitor. His relationship with Leng Ruoxue was simply too bad. However, the city lord's residence's impenetrable defense still allowed Leng Ruoxue to find an opportunity to escape. This fact made him rather depressed. He did not dare to imagine how severe the consequences would be. When he thought of this, he couldn't help but lose his rationality. In front of Ming Xing, the two of them instantly started fighting. The city lords who arrived later saw them and quickly pulled them apart. After asking about the situation, Ming Ji could not help but say helplessly, they're all gone, so what's the point of you guys fighting until your heads are bleeding? Let's quickly find her. I'm already looking for it. Nether Sword said in an unpleasant tone. Let's go out of the city and look. They shouldn't have gone far. The guards of the city lord's mansion had already searched Joyo City, but just in case, it was better for them to search outside the city. Actions spoke louder than words. After deciding on a strategy, Nether Sword and the rest immediately split up to look for Leng Ruoxue and the others outside Joyo City. Unfortunately, they were disappointed to find nothing even after they had cast a net. Even Ming Ge was surprised by this result. Those gods were not familiar with the terrain of the Nine Nether prison, so how could they have left so quickly? I've decided to head to the Dead Sea. After searching for a few days, Ming Jian suddenly told Ming Ge and the others about his decision. It had been 5 days, and not only had they not found Leng Ruoxue and the others, but there was also no news of a deity appearing in the Nine Nether prison. Ming Jian could no longer sit still. If he continued to stay here, he would definitely have a mental breakdown. When the city lords heard his words, they all widened their eyes in disbelief. Did they hear wrong? The Nether Sword actually wanted to head to the Dead Sea alone? Wouldn't that be suicide? As people from the Nine Nether prison, they knew how dangerous the Dead Sea was. Even though they were Ming venerates, it was not easy for them to be safe in the Death Sea. Chapter 25 Dead Sea, Here I Come. 1. Looking at the determined Nether Sword, the city lords could not help but wonder if Leng Ruoxue really held an extraordinary position in their master's heart like what Nether Sword had said. The only bit of doubt in their hearts disappeared without a trace when they saw the Nether Sword's performance. I'll go with you, Ming Ge said after thinking for a while. I'll go too. After Ming Ge's declaration, the other castellans, except Ming Xing, also made their stand. Seeing this, Nether Sword didn't refuse, because it was indeed not very safe for him to go there alone. I'll stay in Joyo City to pass on the news to you. Seeing that everyone had made their stand clear, Ming Xing could only say this. As you wish. Nether Sword sneered. He had nothing to say about Ming Xing's stubbornness. Just like that, not long after Leng Ruoxue and the others left Joyo City, Nether Sword and the others also left Joyo City in search of her. Not only was the journey to the Dead Sea long, but the road was also not peaceful. The places they passed by were mostly remote and wet places, and there were often disgusting evil spirits. Leng Ruoxue and the rest were currently trudging through a forest that had been abandoned for a long time. In this forest, the trees had long since withered, and the entire place was filled with the stench of decay. Bones of unknown creatures could be seen everywhere. After walking a third of the way, Uncle Long and the others couldn't take it anymore. Schwer, isn't there any better place to go? As Uncle Long walked, he asked Leng Ruoxue, who was looking at the map. They weren't afraid of encountering evil ghosts, but the environment here was really too bad. The thick and stinky smell could make them vomit out the food they had eaten 3 days ago. Moreover, they often walked in such a place, so their appetites greatly decreased. No one had the mood to eat at all. The road here is relatively short. If we go through the city, we will be discovered very quickly. So, we can only go this way. Leng Ruoxue said helplessly. She had never thought that the path she had chosen would be so difficult, yet she had to walk it. Miss Leng, why don't we go back? The Dead Sea really isn't a place for humans to go. Seeing Leng Ruoxue's stubbornness, Ruji tried to drag her back for the umpteenth time. The moment she found out that Leng Ruoxue was heading to the Dead Sea, she was almost scared to death. Furthermore, even after listening to her talk about how terrifying the Death Sea was, Leng Ruoxue was still insistent on going. This fact made her feel helpless. Not only that, but she also had to risk her life to accompany a gentleman. Even though Leng Ruoxue had said that she would not force her if she did not want to go, could she go back alone? The answer was, of course, no, and he did not dare to. Otherwise, if his lord knew that she had escaped before the battle, she would have to give up her little life. With so many reasons added together, she had to follow Leng Ruoxue wherever she went. She would also try to persuade her from time to time. Although she could not guarantee that she would change her mind, she still had to say what she had to. Not a place for humans? Then all the more I must go and experience it. Leng Ruoxue said calmly after hearing Ruji's words. Sob. Ruji failed to persuade Leng Ruoxue to turn back. She was so sad that she didn't know what to say. Actually, after spending so much time with Leng Ruoxue, she knew how stubborn Leng Ruoxue could be. However, she could not help but try to persuade her. It had to be said that this was also a way of her being cheap. For example, Uncle Long and the others had never tried to persuade Leng Ruoxue not to do anything because they knew that it would be useless even if they did. Shuai was right. Thinking of this, Uncle Long and the others looked at Ruji with sympathy. Seeing everyone like this, Ruji became even more worried. Sob. She didn't want to turn back until she hit a wall. After dispelling Ruji's thoughts, Leng Ruoxue turned her beautiful eyes to Uncle Long and the others. She probed, "Uncle Long, why don't you guys stay in the house?" Thanks. Upon hearing this, Uncle Long exploded. "Little girl, are we that useless? You're a young lady staying outside, but you're letting us men into the house. Are you looking down on us? You're so bad. I'm just afraid that you're working too hard, so I wanted to let you out after we've crossed this forest." Hearing Uncle Long's words, Leng Ruoxue felt wronged. If it's tough, then so be it. This place isn't like the divine world. It's better for us to accompany you outside. Otherwise, if the mistress of the dark world finds out, she might just kill us. Uncle Long said. If it was any other time, Shuai would have allowed them to enter the house. However, in such a harsh environment, to ask them to abandon Shuai and enjoy life alone, was that something that a human would do? Could it be that so many men were not as capable as a little girl? Actually, I just want to get out of the forest as soon as possible. Leng Ruoxue said honestly. At this moment, all the men were inexplicably sad and angry. It turned out that they had delayed Shuai's journey. Woo! Little girl, don't be so harsh. I've decided to burn this place down. If you guys stay outside with me, I'm afraid that the fire will spread to you guys. Leng Ruoxue explained. Shuai, this isn't an excuse for us to enter the house, is it? Uncle Long carefully confirmed. Of course not. Leng Ruoxue made a solemn promise. Then, let's go in. Shuai, once we're out of here, you can move us out again. Uncle Long reminded him worriedly. All right. Leng Ruoxue agreed with a smile. Then, with a thought, she moved everyone into her personal room. I want to go out, I want to go out. Suddenly, Feng Chuan's voice rang in Leng Ruoxue's mind. Stay inside obediently. Leng Ruoxue refused to let him out. Shuai, I can help you set the fire. Feng Chuan said, a little embarrassed. You're right. Leng Ruoxue thought for a while and moved Feng Chuan out. Feng Chuan, who had just come out, was as excited as a happy little bird. Seeing him like this, Leng Ruoxue was surprised. Are you satisfied with this place? I'm not satisfied. I have the urge to set this filthy place on fire. Feng Chuan was very honest. All right. I'm the same. Leng Ruoxue agreed. As soon as Leng Ruoxue finished speaking, Feng Chuan had already transformed into his true form and was floating in the air. He waved at Leng Ruoxue, get on. Feeling the scorching heat right in front of her and looking at the blazing flames on Feng Chuan's body, Leng Ruoxue hesitated. She wasn't a phoenix who could be reborn from the ashes. Wouldn't something happen if she sat on him like this? Don't be afraid, you won't be burned. Feng Chuan saw Leng Ruoxue's hesitation and kindly advised her. One must know that in the entire immortal realm, no one had ever had the chance to ride a phoenix before. Why didn't this girl dare to be the first to try? He was really disappointed. I won't do it even if it's hot. Leng Ruoxue was speechless. I promise I won't burn you, okay? Feng Chuan said with a good temper. Chapter 25-26, Dead Sea, Here I Come. 2. You said it yourself. If you burn me, I'll pluck all the feathers off your body. Leng Ruoxue laughed evilly. This time, it was Feng Chuan's turn to be afraid. However, it still bravely welcomed its first passenger. After Leng Ruoxue sat on it, she didn't feel hot at all. On the contrary, she felt comfortable and warm. Feng Chuan, you're a must in winter. Leng Ruoxue praised with a smile. Sure, not everyone can afford to equip someone of my grade. Feng Chuan couldn't help but remind her. That's true. Let's start the fire. Leng Ruoxue did not forget about the proper business. After that, she threw out a small flame. Feng Chuan saw it and his mouth couldn't help but twitch. This flame is too small, look at it. Feng Chuan, who wanted to show off, opened his sharp beak and spat out a mouthful of Nanling Li fire. In an instant, the whole abandoned forest was set on fire. Leng Ruoxue and Feng Chuan were bystanders. They rose to the sky and looked down at the burning forest. The two's flames were very powerful, and not long after, the forest that emitted a stench was completely turned into ashes. After being purified by the flames, the environment here was obviously much better. Hee hee. It's a success. Feng Chuan laughed foolishly. Sure, quickly let us out. Uncle Long and the others who saw this scene from the house also said. Uncle Long, I've changed my mind. Before we reach the Dead Sea, you guys can stay in there. Leng Ruoxue said with a serious expression. What? It's so dangerous outside, how can we just stay in the house and enjoy life? Uncle Long and the others would never do such a thing. I've decided to let Feng Chuan take me to the Dead Sea. With it as a mount, it'll be much faster. Leng Ruoxue stated her reason. Then, Uncle Long and the others didn't know what to say. They didn't have the courage to go there on Feng Chuan's back. Sure, aren't you afraid of being discovered? At this moment, Feng Chuan couldn't help but ask. Previously, someone had suggested to ride a flying beast to the Dead Sea, but Leng Ruoxue had rejected it, saying that she was afraid of being discovered by Nether Sword and the others. Why was she not afraid now? He couldn't understand. Women were really fickle. Don't be afraid. It's been so many days. It won't be easy for him to catch up to us. Leng Ruoxue replied matter-of-factly. You're right. Feng Chuan agreed. For the next few days, he would be Leng Ruoxue's flying beast. Feng Chuan's speed was indeed fast. In just a few days, he had already carried Leng Ruoxue and flew almost 2/3 of the distance. In a few more days, they would reach the Dead Sea. But along the way, they also encountered a lot of trouble. Although there were no spirit beasts in the Netherworld prison, they had nether beasts. The most obvious difference between nether beasts and spirit beasts was that nether beasts were brutal and bloodthirsty. Thanks if the sky of the Divine Realm was the territory of the Phoenix tribe, then the sky of the Nine Nether prison was the territory of the Nether Dragons. The Nether Dragon was undeniably the #1 nether beast in the Nine Nether prison. They were brutal, bloodthirsty, and sometimes even disowned their own family in order to fight for territory. While Feng Chuan was flying with Leng Ruoxue, they had encountered several netherworms. Naturally, both sides had a big fight. The Abyss Dragons might look ferocious, but they worshipped the strong. As long as you could defeat them, they wouldn't care if you were a deity or a meditation cultivator. So, in just a few days, the team that only had Leng Ruoxue and Feng Chuan had expanded. Behind them, there were a few Abyss Dragons following them openly, and this team was still expanding. Ro Jis' mouth twitched as she saw this frightening scene from the other side of the room. She knew it. She knew it. Anything could happen around Miss Leng. If such a brutal Abyss Dragon had become Leng Ruoxue's follower, it would be easy to reach the Dead Sea safely. Ro Ji was a little bit anxious. However, Uncle Long and the others didn't find it strange, but they were also worried. Sob. The girl had grown up. Did she not need them anymore? Leng Ruoxue was completely unaware of their sorrow. At this time, she was busy looking for a place to set up a tent and cook dinner. Of course, the ones who did it were her new underlings. In order to perform well, the netherworms were eager to show their best skills. Although they were the size of small mountains, they were very agile in their work. However, they did not know how to cook. Otherwise, they would have done all the work. After the netherworms had set up their tents and eagerly helped Leng Ruoxue start a fire, Leng Ruoxue took out some food from her storage ring and slowly began to cook. Soon, the aroma of food filled the air, attracting many nether beasts nearby. However, the aura here was too strong, and no nether beast dared to come over to seek death. When the nether dragons smelled this fragrance, they felt extremely blissful. Woo! Following boss was indeed the right decision. Following boss, they could fight, and they could eat. They were filled with happiness as they ate, but Uncle Long and the others in the house were burning with anger. Damn it, these hateful guys actually ate their food. Because Schwer had said that in view of the netherworm's huge appetites, the people in the house had to ask her to do it herself. She couldn't afford to do it. Uncle Long and the others were quite sad and angry about Schwer's favoritism for the new. They felt even more disappointed, especially after they had been rejected when they had strongly requested to go out and share hardships with Schwer. Sob. Schwer really didn't need them anymore. Uncle Long and the rest continued to worry. Leng Ruoxue, Feng Chuan, and the other abyss dragons were having a picnic outside, but they were eating very happily. What fragrant food! Can you share some with me? At this moment, a clear and cold male voice rang out. The abyss dragons immediately became alert. This person was so strong. The abyss dragons were on high alert. Their huge bodies formed a circle, protecting Leng Ruoxue and Feng Chuan. Seeing them like this, Leng Ruoxue couldn't help but feel touched. These guys might look black and weren't very good looking, but their sincere hearts towards her were genuine. The owner of the voice also saw this scene. After a slight surprise, he immediately calmed down. At this moment, Leng Ruoxue also raised her head and glanced at the owner of the voice. She was stunned. Why was it him? Ming Ji. Leng Ruoxue said calmly. Miss Leng, it really wasn't easy to find you. Seeing that the other party had recognized him, Minga smiled faintly. You're the only one? Leng Ruoxue asked curiously. She didn't believe that this fellow was the only one who had come after her. Nether Sword was a timid and stupid person. After knowing that she had left, he would definitely come to find her. No, we got separated. On the way to the Dead Sea, they had encountered a tornado that was hard to come by in 1,000 years. A few of them had been blown away by the wind. It was quite unbelievable to them, so he didn't want to go into detail. Because it was too embarrassing, wasn't it? Chapter 25-27, Dead Sea, Here I Come. 3. Then you're lucky to have met me. Leng Ruoxue remained calm and did not show any signs of guilt at the sight of Ming Ji. Ming Ji found this even more unbelievable, but he still maintained his usual smile and echoed, Yup. I think so too. Hearing Ming Ji's words, Leng Ruoxue couldn't help but narrow her beautiful eyes. She didn't believe that Ming Ji said that because she had a good temper. On the contrary, she felt that this man was very well hidden. At least, he rarely revealed his emotions to the public. Such a man was often the most dangerous. Let's eat. Leng Ruoxue changed the subject and served Ming Ji a bowl of soup. After saying his thanks, Minga drank the soup gracefully and attentively. Obviously, she had exerted her full effort to divide her mind to the extreme. Seeing that the powerful man knew their boss, the nether dragons let down their guard a little and continued eating their food. But from time to time, they would steal glances at Minga, which made her feel like she was sitting on pins and needles. If there had only been one netherworm, he might not have reacted much, but with so many netherworms staring at him at the same time, there was probably no one other than his lord who could remain as calm as before. And today, he had gained a lot of knowledge. At least, this was his first time dining with a netherworm. Under immense pressure, Ming Ji finally finished the dinner Leng Ruoxue had given him. Although he looked calm on the surface, he was actually breaking out in a cold sweat. Miss Leng, these abyss dragons. After hesitating for a moment, Ming Ji could not suppress the curiosity in his heart and asked. He did not believe that these abyss dragons had captured Leng Ruoxue. She's our boss. Without waiting for Leng Ruoxue to speak, a quick-witted abyss dragon interrupted. This answer was clearly out of Ming's expectations. Since when did the netherworm like to acknowledge a boss? Why didn't he know about it? He had originally thought that these abyss dragons were attracted by Leng Ruoxue's delicious food and had decided to protect her. However, it seemed like he was wrong. He was Leng Ruoxue's underling. However, for so many netherworms to acknowledge a boss, wasn't this a heaven-defying act? In the entire Nether prison, other than his lord, there was probably no one else who had the ability to make the nether dragons follow him, and not just one, but a group. There were 15 in total. This time, he really did not know what to say. Seeing Ming Ji's shock, Leng Ruoxue kindly explained, although I defeated them, I never thought of letting them follow me. But they refused to leave, so I had no choice. Listening to Leng Ruoxue's explanation, Ming Ji was filled with grief and anger. This was clearly a way to attract hatred, wasn't it? It had to be known that many people wanted the netherworm to follow them, but that person had to be interested in them first. And you've attacked with over 10 of them at once. These netherworms are really despicable. Ming Ji wanted to look up to the sky and let out a long sigh. When he was young, he had once wanted to capture an abyss dragon as his beast pet. Unfortunately, even though he had defeated the abyss dragon, he was unable to make the abyss dragon acknowledge him as its master. Not only that, the abyss dragon that he had captured had even arrogantly self-destructed. This fact had dealt a heavy blow to him. Now that he saw the dozen or so abyss dragons in front of Leng Ruoxue acting as obedient as kittens, it would be a lie to say that he was not jealous. An abyss dragon. What a powerful combat force. If he had a netherworm, his combat power would definitely rise to another level. However, although the netherworm wasn't very intelligent and was bloodthirsty and brutal, it was also very proud and wouldn't easily recognize a master. This fact was quite a pain in the ass for Minga. Leng Ruoxue seemed to have read his mind. She hooked her finger and called Ming Ji to her as if she was calling a puppy. She asked in a low voice, "You want the netherworm?" Upon hearing this, Ming Ji's eyes lit up and she secretly praised Leng Ruoxue for being so understanding. He wanted it. What he needed was a beast with thick skin, that could fly, defend, and attack. The netherworm was definitely the best all-round beast pet. Thanks, then do you know why these netherworms are following me? Leng Ruoxue asked with a smirk after learning Ming Ji's thoughts. Why? Ming Ji asked shamelessly. Because I didn't like them at all. After I defeated them, I wanted to let them go, but they refused to leave and insisted on following me, so it became what you see. Leng Ruoxue said honestly. What she said was the truth, but in Ming Ji's ears, it sounded like she was showing off. Ming Ji became even more indignant. Sob. Leng Ruoxue was trying to tell him that the abyss dragon was a bitch and had the masochist physique. If he didn't want to leave and insisted on staying, then what was he doing? Wait a minute. From the expression on Leng Ruoxue's face, she didn't seem to be joking. Was she coaxing him to play? Could it be true? Minga was skeptical, but he still made up his mind to give it a try when he had the chance. The netherworms were quite attractive to him. Leng Ruoxue knew that Ming Ji did not fully believe her words, but she did not care. She liked to speak the truth. On the second day of their journey with Ming Ji, they passed by the territory of another abyss dragon. In order to protect its territory from being invaded, the abyss dragon naturally launched a fierce attack on Leng Ruoxue and the others. Ming Ji wanted to help but was stopped by Leng Ruoxue. Watch me. I'll prove it to you with the facts. After Leng Ruoxue finished speaking, she and Feng Chuan went up to the nether dragon's challenge. What happened next was, of course, Leng Ruoxue and Feng Chuan joining forces to defeat the abyss dragon. After that, it was Leng Ruoxue who wanted to chase the abyss dragon away. Who knew that the bashful abyss dragon would only struggle for a few minutes before it made up its mind to follow Len Ruoxue? Ming Ji's jaw dropped when he saw this. He had no choice but to believe it because the abyss dragon was just like what Len Ruoxue had said it wouldn't leave even if Len Ruoxue wanted to. This was too unbelievable. Minga was filled with envy, jealousy, and hatred. However, he had also found a way to subdue the abyss dragon. Over the next few days, they encountered many more abyss dragons. This time, it was Ming Song who took action. In the end, it was naturally Ming Song who defeated them. Following Len Ruoxue's example, he ordered his defeated opponents to leave quickly with an arrogant, cold, and disdainful expression. When the abyss dragons who had lost to him heard this, they all disappeared without a trace with their tails between their legs without hesitation. This result also left Ming Ji dumbfounded. However, after a few times, he was completely infuriated. "You bastard! You can't bully people like this." Could it be that all the netherworms he had met were male, and the opposite sex repelled each other, so they didn't like him? Those netherworms are definitely all male. I need to find a female netherworm to tame. Ming Ji, who was not willing to accept his defeat, shouted angrily. "Yes, you should find a female one." Len Ruoxue tried her best to hold back her laughter as she consoled him. "Ai. Don't waste your energy. The netherworm won't take a fancy to you." One of the netherworms couldn't stand it anymore, so it had to tell the truth. "Why? I am Ming Zun." Hearing the netherworm's honest words, Ming Ji was filled with grief and indignation. "This has nothing to do with strength. We do worship the strong, but your affinity is not enough," the abyss dragon said with a look of sympathy. Although they had also lost, they felt very close to their boss. As for the meditation cultivators, even if they were stronger than them, they didn't like them at all. Chapter 25-28, Dead Sea, Here I Come. 4. This was the difference. This is not fair. This is not fair. Ming Ji was heartbroken. Len Ruoxue didn't know how to comfort him when she saw his heartbroken look. In fact, if the affinity was not enough, she could still force it to recognize her as its master. However, she was not willing to treat cute beasties that way, so she could only keep these words to herself. However, the nether dragons did not care about fairness. After all, there were no beast tamers in the 9 nether prison. Thus, they were not afraid that someone would go against their will and force them to acknowledge a master. If he couldn't beat his opponent, he could just self-destruct. It could be said that the beasts of the netherworld prison were not only stubborn, but also had a violent temper. Self-destruction was even easier than eating and sleeping for them, so they didn't think it was a difficult thing. It was because he knew their nature that Ming Ji was even more depressed. For the next few days, he was so depressed that he didn't say a word. This situation continued until the Death Sea. "Shuer, the Dead Sea should be just ahead," Feng Chuan said, looking at the map. "Yes." Len Ruoxue nodded her head. The closer they got to the Dead Sea, the more she could feel the temperature drop. When she saw the gates of the Dead Sea, she could not help but feel a little confused. The Dead Sea? Who could tell her how the Dead Sea had become the Dead Sea City? Where was the sea? Where was the sea? Len Ruoxue felt that she had been tricked. She did not see the sea at all, or had they gone the wrong way and come to the wrong place? "This is the Dead Sea?" Len Ruoxue asked, speechless. "The map shows it, and so do the 2 words on the city gate," Feng Chuan said honestly. After hearing Feng Chuan's words, Len Ruoxue turned to look at the abyss dragon behind her. The largest abyss dragon quickly nodded. "Boss, this is the place." "Where is the sea?" Len Ruoxue could not help but ask. "I'm underground in this city." Minga, who had gradually recovered from the shock, replied. "We're not in the wrong place?" Len Ruoxue asked, unwilling to give up. "No, I didn't. This is the Dead Sea. After we enter, everyone must be careful. Ming Ji looked at Leng Ruoxue deeply as she reminded her. Thanks, he knew that even if the heavens rained down daggers on him, he would no longer be able to stop this woman. Hence, he gave up on wasting his breath on Leng Ruoxue and prepared to risk his life to accompany her. She looked at the majestic number of netherworms behind her, then at Ming Ji. Leng Ruoxue actually wanted to say, "Move all of you into the house." She could go in by herself. However, she knew that if she said that, Ming Ji would probably fly into a rage. Since he had suffered quite a lot along the way, Leng Ruoxue decided not to provoke him. But after some thought, she still moved the huge netherworms in. There was no helping it, they were too conspicuous. Seeing that the netherworms had suddenly disappeared, Minga asked in surprise, "What about the netherworms?" "I've kept it." Leng Ruoxue's reply was as if it was a matter of course. Hearing this, Ming Ji almost vomited blood. How could he put it away? At this moment, the netherworms that had been moved into the house also exploded. "Boss! Boss! Quickly let us out. We still have to protect you." The abyss dragons scurried around the courtyard in a frenzy, their deafening roars causing Uncle Dragon and the others' eardrums to hurt. In the end, Leng Ruoxue ignored their request, while Uncle Dragon and the others could not take it anymore and gave them a good beating. After that, the aggrieved abyss dragons became obedient. Woo, these people are so cruel. They were so scared. "Boss, help." The abyss dragons were roaring and shouting in their hearts, but when Uncle Dragon and the others glared at them fiercely, they immediately lowered their heads like little wives. Next, it was Uncle Dragon and the others' turn to shout loudly, "Schwer, move us out. Uncle Long, be good and stay in the house. It's not suitable for too many people to move around together." Leng Ruoxue's gentle and comforting voice reverberated throughout the courtyard. The moment they heard her words, no matter if it was a human or a beast, all of them were depressed. After settling Uncle Dragon and the netherworms, Leng Ruoxue turned to Ming Ji with a faint smile. "Let's go in." "All right." Minga was helpless, but he also knew that the woman in front of him was not as weak as she looked. On the contrary, she was a big beast in the coat of a little white rabbit. Minga had seen this from her previous battle with the netherworms. "The Dead Sea. I'm coming," Leng Ruoxue said excitedly. Then, she ordered Feng Chuan to land and the three of them walked towards the gate of the Dead Sea. When they arrived at the entrance of the Dead Sea City, they paid the entrance fee as per usual. Under the surprised gazes of the city guards, the three of them walked into the Dead Sea City. By the way, what did the guards give us? The moment they entered the city, Leng Ruoxue looked at the dark green leaf in her hand and asked curiously. They had paid the entrance fee, yet they had received a leaf. What was going on? "This leaf can protect our identity in the Dead Sea City for 3 times. After 3 times, it's up to us whether we live or die. Furthermore, we have paid the entrance fee to enter the city openly. If we sneak in without paying the entrance fee, we are considered unregistered citizens. Once we are discovered, we will be wanted by the entire Dead Sea City. At that time, anyone will have the right to kill an unregistered citizen." Minga explained. "Ah. Then Uncle Long and the others won't be able to come out?" Leng Ruoxue couldn't help but ask. If that really happened, she would feel guilty. Originally, she had planned to let Uncle Long and the others out for some fresh air after they had settled down in the city. Now it seemed that it would be dangerous to let Uncle Long and the others out. Chapter 25-29, The God of Slaughter Descends. 1. It's not impossible to come out, as long as you are prepared to be hunted down by the entire Dead Sea. Ming Ji said, gloating. Uncle Long and the others in the house naturally heard his words clearly, so as soon as he finished speaking, Uncle Long and the others immediately protested, "We're not afraid of being hunted down. We want to get out. I must. We also want it. Boss. Let us out." Seeing Uncle Dragon and the others making a ruckus, the netherworms also roared, unwilling to be outdone. The series of roars and shouts caused Leng Ruoxue's eardrums to ring. She had no choice but to cut off the connection with the house. Then, she calmly said, I will consider your opinion. Let's go. Hearing Lin Ruoxia's words, it was Ming Ji's turn to be dumbfounded. All right. He had to admit that he had intentionally not told Lin Ruoxia about this before he came in. His motive was to see how Lin Ruoxia would react when she heard about this. Would she be afraid or panic? Unfortunately, to his disappointment, the other party was neither afraid nor panicked. Instead, he was still calm. Lin Ruoxia was calm, but Ming Ji was not. He regretted his momentary curiosity. If something happened to this little girl in the Dead Sea, how was he going to explain it to his lord? Wouldn't his lord peel off his skin? Even though he had some confidence in protecting this little girl as long as he did not encounter the master of the Dead Sea, based on his understanding of Lin Ruoxia, this little girl was definitely not someone who would stay put. If he did not take care of any of them, the consequences would be unimaginable. Seeing Ming Ji's hesitation, Lin Ruoxia smiled and said, What, are you afraid? A provocation. This was definitely a direct provocation. He should be the one who said that, right? Why was it a little girl's turn to ask him? Minga felt as if her self-esteem had been deeply hurt. Boo, this girl looks so weak and fragile, but why is she so uncute? Regret. Minga was filled with regret. Why did he have to meet Lin Ruoxia when he was separated from his teammates? If he had not met her, or if he had only met her in the Dead Sea, he would not have suffered so many blows along the way. Yes. Ever since Ming Ji had met Lin Ruoxia, he had suffered more blows than he had ever experienced in his life. He felt that he should protect the future Netherworld Empress, but after spending a few days with her, he realized helplessly that she was so tough that she didn't need his protection at all. Whether it was the powerful and thick-skinned netherworms, the nauseating evil ghosts, or the natives of the Nine Nether prison, she was able to handle them with ease. If they did not attack, she would not take the initiative to provoke them. If they attacked, they would definitely be the unlucky ones. This was the experience he had gained along the way. And regardless of the other party's strength, she wouldn't be able to gain any advantage. Thinking of Lin Ruoxia's fearsome flames, Ming Ji's little heart could not help but tremble. This little girl was definitely the Chu Qiao of the fierce tigress. He was a wolf in sheep's clothing. When they first heard that this little girl had gone missing, they were extremely worried. They were afraid that she would be in danger. Now that they had been in contact with her for a few days, Ming Ji truly felt that the person they should be worried about should not be Lin Ruoxia, but the unlucky creatures in the 9th Nether prison. More importantly, this was the first time he felt that strength really didn't mean everything. Thanks. When he thought of this, he forced himself to calm down and said as if nothing had happened, Yup. If you're afraid, please ask for protection. Lin Ruoxia did not expect Ming Ji, who looked so serious and had the air of a master, to be so thick-skinned as to say such shameless words. After being stunned for a moment, she revealed a smile that could cause the downfall of a city and a nation and said, No problem, you'll have meat to eat if you follow me. Then I'll have to ask boss to protect me in the future. In his amazement, Minga seized the opportunity and did not hold back at all. But then, he couldn't help but remind, Boss, can you not laugh so flirtatiously? It'll cause trouble. Flirtatious? Lin Ruoxia almost exploded. She wasn't smiling coquettishly. That was clearly a smile, all right? It was a smile. However, what Ming Ji said was true. While she was talking to Ming Ji, Lin Ruoxia could already feel countless burning gazes on her. What do we do now? Lin Ruoxia asked Ming Ji's local tyrant. It's good to be calm. They won't dare to come and find trouble easily. Ming Ji said confidently. Unfortunately, he had underestimated Lin Ruoxia's ability to attract trouble. As soon as he finished speaking, the two of them were immediately surrounded. They were surrounded by tall and fierce-looking burly men. These people had a terrifying smell of blood on them. One look and you could tell that they were masters of blood. The way they looked at Lin Ruoxia was filled with lust and evil. It was as if Len Ruoxue was completely naked in front of them and had nowhere to hide. Facing these gazes, Len Ruoxue became increasingly calm. On the other hand, Ming Ji furrowed his brows and released his Ming Zun's pressure. Who knew that these fiendish fanatics did not care at all? Their burning hot eyes were still fixed on Len Ruoxue, and some of them were even drooling. Get lost. Mingo was furious, and the consequences were severe. At this time, a boorish man who looked like the leader of these people, with a wretched smile on his lips, said to Ming Ji with a smile, "This brother, don't be angry. Since we've come to the Dead Sea, we should share our troubles and blessings. If there's a woman, we can play with her too. When you're done playing with her, you can let us play with her too." The slightly ugly man had a good eye. He could tell that Ming Song was more powerful than him, so he naturally did not want to fight her head-on. However, he was not afraid of Ming Song, because in the Dead Sea, strength did not speak for itself. What they looked at was the faction that she belonged to, and the factions here had always been deeply rooted. They were the local tyrants, and as local tyrants, there was no reason for them to be afraid of 3 new wanderers, especially among the 3. 2 of them had especially rich spirit chi, so of course they couldn't let them go. After hearing the man's words, Minga almost exploded in anger. These guys were really looking for death. However, he also knew why these people were so arrogant. They were acting this way because the master of the Dead Sea was backing them up. Hence, they did not even care about him, Ming Zun. The furious Ming Ji had intended to teach these people a lesson and at the same time, intimidate the others. Who knew that before he could do anything, he heard Len Ruoxue's grinning voice, "Don't wait until he's tired of playing with me. I'll play with you guys now." Ah! After hearing this, Mingo was at a loss. Should he sympathize with these guys who had taken the initiative to die? Even though Len Ruoxue had a smile on her face, he knew that this girl was furious. However, it's good to let her vent her anger. As for me, I'll just wait for help at any time. With this thought in mind, Ming Ji put on the posture of a master, allowing Len Ruoxue to do whatever she wanted. Chapter 25-30, The God of Slaughter Descends, 2, Hehe. This girl was still the most understanding. Since you're taking the initiative, this grandpa won't be polite. Seeing that Len Ruoxue was so tactful, the local bully naturally wouldn't reject her. Can I join too? Feng Chuan didn't want to be ignored, so he interrupted. All right. The local bully sized up Feng Chuan who had spoken. Seeing that Feng Chuan's skin was as soft and tender as a pretty boy's, he was also overjoyed. Not only did he like women, but he also liked men. Therefore, he naturally could not bear to let go of such a high-quality woman. Of the 3 people in front of him, other than the one with the strongest strength, the other 2 were very much to his liking. The local snake boy was quite satisfied with his romantic encounter. As for his subordinates, they were already drooling. Top grade. It's really of the highest quality. They had been hiding in this godforsaken place, and this place was filled with tough-skinned men. They couldn't find anyone to have fun with even if they wanted to. But now, there were 2 top-grade forbidden tortoises, and they were cooperating with each other. Of course, they were happy. Boss, quickly bring them to our territory. We'll be robbed if we stay here. Seeing that their boss was completely immersed in the beauty and unable to extricate himself, a man with wretched small eyes reminded him in a low voice. Right. That made sense. 2 beauties, quickly come home with me. I'll definitely take good care of you. The local snake boy said happily. He felt that these 3 people were afraid of his power, and completely did not realize that their joy was about to turn into sorrow. Len Ruoxue thought that she could take care of these people here, but when she saw that this disgusting idiot actually dared to bring her home, she nodded in satisfaction and said, "Then well, thank you in advance. Lead the way." The snake boy's smile widened when he heard that. Meanwhile, Ming Ji, who had been watching coldly from the side, felt surge of sympathy for him. This guy had definitely invited a wolf into his house. Great, now that we're in their lair, it'll be easier to deal with them. It was just nice to wipe them out in one go. Unfortunately, not only did the local snake boy not realize the impending danger, he was so beautiful that his tail was about to rise to the sky. He ordered his men to bring the two beauties he had taken a fancy to, as well as Ming Ji, who was a burden to him, back to his lair. Although the force that this local thug belonged to was one of the strongest in the Dead Sea, it was not the strongest. He was afraid that a long delay would bring more trouble. After he brought Len Ruoxue, Feng Chuan, and Ming Ji back, he could not wait to enjoy them first. Of course, his only targets were Len Ruoxue and Feng Chuan. He would never dare to have any ideas about Ming Ji. Seeing that he was going to exclude Ming Ji, Len Ruoxue was not going to let it go. Len Ruoxue deliberately pouted her pink and tender lips and said in a gentle voice, "You don't like him? This guy's face is pretty." As soon as Minga heard that it was her, black lines immediately appeared on her forehead. What was this little girl up to? He knew that his looks were passable, but he didn't have any fetishes for men. However, in order to cooperate with Len Ruoxue, he remained expressionless. When the local snake boy heard Len Ruoxue's coquettish tone, his body went limp. He looked at Ming Ji, and then caught a glimpse of the disdain in Len Ruoxue's beautiful eyes. His brain heated up, and he said with pride, "Then let him stay here to serve you. Serve your ancestors." Hearing the snake boy's words, Minga couldn't help but curse in her heart. However, she still showed no expression on her face. Her behavior was taken as shyness by the snake boy, and his self-confidence swelled in an instant. He knew it. He was such a strong man, how could anyone reject him? The overjoyed local thug hurriedly brought Len Ruoxue and the other two into the room and began to undress impatiently. "Thanks, ugh." Seeing him like this, Feng Chuan really wanted to tell him not to take off his clothes, just come directly. However, Ming Ji's face darkened when he saw the snakeman's actions. He had never thought that someone would actually dare to plot against him. How serious was this guy's sperm problem? When the local snake boy was left with only a piece of cloth, he turned around and asked Len Ruoxue and the other two, "Who's going to let me go first?" "Let's go together." The three of them said in unison. "Together? Good. I like the heavy taste." When the snake boy heard this, his eyes flashed with lust as bright as the sun. It was clear that he liked this idea very, very much. However, before he could enjoy himself enough, Feng Chuan took the lead and kicked the local snake boy who was close to him onto the bed. Feng Chuan's kick was definitely not light, but they didn't hear the local snakeman cry out in pain as they had hoped. Instead, they heard a comfortable. These words instantly caused Len Ruoxue and the other two's faces to turn black. Feng Chuan jumped onto the bed in anger and started kicking and punching the snake boy. But the harder he kicked, the more excited the snake boy became. Comfortable. It was so comfortable. I didn't expect you to be into this. I really like it. Use more strength. You bastard. Use a little more strength, will you? Feng Chuan was even angrier. He directly spat out a mouthful of Nanling leaf fire, burning the snake man's body. Who knew that by doing this, the snake man's screams became even more perverted? Arg. Ah. Ah. I like you so much. I've decided, you'll be my #1 male pet from now on. The local tyrant quickly established Feng Chuan's supreme position as a male pet in the fight with Feng Chuan. Hearing this, Feng Chuan wanted to kneel down. It seemed that he was still too innocent and not suitable to deal with this kind of shameless guy. After that, Feng Chuan jumped away from the guy who was still burning with flames with a defeated look on his face. He was really convinced. Seeing Feng Chuan's dejected look, Len Ruoxue raised her eyebrows and looked at Ming Ji. Her meaning was clear, you go. Minga hesitated for a moment, then said with some difficulty, this. I give up. He was also a person who only knew how to use his fists to speak. If he were to really make a move, wouldn't it benefit that guy who was not afraid of the heat and was screaming happily even when his body was on fire? He wouldn't do something that would make him suffer a loss. Sure, I'll leave it to you, Feng Chuan said with an expression as if he was entrusting her with an important task. Okay, I'll leave it to you. Minga immediately agreed. AI. With two big men here, you still have to let me, a weak woman, make a move. The world is really degenerating day by day. Why are men so useless? Glancing at the two of them, Lin Ruoxue sighed with emotion. Ming Ji and Feng Chuan's foreheads were filled with black lines as they started to break out in cold sweat. They could tell that if Lin Ruoxue were to make a move, they would have to bear the burden of the current crime of men being useless. However, looking at the snakehead man who was still shouting happily on the bed, the two of them revealed an expression of going all out and looked at Lin Ruoxue with anticipation. Seeing that the two of them had made up their minds, Lin Ruoxue smiled and walked towards the bed. She looked at the snake boy whose body was already on fire and could not help but sigh. The people of the Nine Nether prison are indeed thick-skinned. If the Phoenix clan's southern spirit leaf fire were to burn a person from the immortal realm, he would have been burned to death long ago. However, this person in front of him was actually still alive. This was truly too inconceivable. Chapter 25-31, The God of Slaughter Descends, 3, It's because I didn't use enough flames, Feng Chuan couldn't help but explain. He didn't want Lin Ruoxue to think that his natal flames were useless. In reality, he definitely didn't want this fellow to die too quickly. Lin Ruoxue smiled, then threw out a small flame on the snake boy's body. In an instant, the snake boy's cries grew louder. There seemed to be a hint of moaning in his pain, which made Feng Chuan and Ming Ji break out in cold sweat. But soon, the snake boy could no longer scream. Let's go. Lin Ruoxue dusted her hands and pulled the two dumbfounded men away. The two men did not expect Lin Ruoxue to stop so quickly and were rather surprised. However, they still obediently followed Lin Ruoxue out of the room. As soon as they walked out, the room behind them instantly burst into flames, making the two even more dumbfounded. Then, there was a loud crash and the house collapsed in front of them. Arg! Boss is in trouble. It was unknown who shouted, but Lin Ruoxue and the rest heard the sound of frantic footsteps. Not long after, they were surrounded by people again. This time, Lin Ruoxue didn't waste any time. She shouted at Feng Chuan, let's close the door and beat the dogs. All right. Feng Chuan gave Lin Ruoxue an understanding look, then ran to the door on his own accord, guarding it like a door god. The subordinates of the local tyrant were not too afraid at first. After all, they had so many people, while the other party only had 3 people. However, they soon felt the fear of the end of the world. The godlike Lin Ruoxue and Ming Ji were killing in all directions. In an instant, he had taken care of nearly a third of the opponents present. The speed was so fast that they did not even see what had happened. The companions beside him had already turned into ashes. This time, many people were afraid. Arg! The killing god is here. Run for your lives. Someone shouted in panic. Then, those who were lucky enough to survive suddenly realized that it was more important to escape. Unfortunately, they were too optimistic. When they rushed to the door, they were all stopped by Feng Chuan. This time, Feng Chuan didn't show any mercy. He directly released a large amount of southern spirit leaf fire. Soon, most of them were on fire. Cries of pain and howls were endless. There were wolves in front and tigers behind. The opponents who could not avoid them fled in all directions in the courtyard. Unfortunately, no matter where they ran, there was only one end: death. Lin Ruoxue and Ming Ji showed no mercy, while Feng Chuan was in charge of setting the fire. In a matter of seconds, all of their opponents were annihilated. After eliminating their opponents, Lin Ruoxue's specialty was naturally to destroy the corpses and get rid of all traces. After burning down all the houses, the 3 of them swaggered away as if nothing had happened. Fortunately, they were brought to the outskirts of the city, and the surroundings could be said to be deserted. Therefore, when they returned to the bustling main street, the news of the snakeman's incident had not yet spread. After venting his anger, Ming Ji's mood was obviously much better. He was afraid that Len Ruoxue would feel burdened, so he explained, 90% of the people from the Dead Sea are murderous and bloodthirsty wanted criminals. Therefore, there's no need to worry when you kill them. Saving your life is the right way. I know, I don't have any concerns. Len Ruoxue said with a smile. Ugh. Minga didn't know what to say. He felt that he had been overthinking things. He should have known that such a tough little girl wouldn't have any burden in her heart about what had happened in the past. Boo, he had been overthinking. From this moment on, he had decided not to treat the fierce and tough Len Ruoxue as a woman. It was because the most brutal women in the Nine Nether prison were nothing compared to her. After adjusting his depressed mood, Minga brought Len Ruoxue and the others to find a hotel to stay in for the time being. Then, he went to the streets alone to find out more information. Why didn't he bring Len Ruoxue and Feng Chuan along? This was because he felt that if he brought the two of them along, trouble would definitely come knocking on his door. Regardless of whether they were attracted by Len Ruoxue's beauty or by the spiritual aura around the two of them, in short, these two were synonymous with trouble. He didn't want to kill all the Dead Sea City's people before he could get any information. It was a pity that his wish was beautiful, but reality was incomparably cruel. He walked around the street for less than half a day and returned to the inn dejectedly. However, he suddenly realized that the people in the inn were looking at him strangely. Most importantly, the inn was still intact before he left. How did the inn change so much after he left for a while? The inn could no longer be considered a complete house. More than half of the lobby had been reduced to ruins, and the remaining parts were also in tatters. Only half of the stairs were left. Looking at the only half of the staircase, Minga hesitated for a moment before she walked up with heavy steps. AI. Something had happened again. However, he knew that it was definitely not the little girl or the phoenix who had met with an accident. Otherwise, he would not have dared to leave at ease. Thanks, however, he couldn't understand. He didn't bring the two of them along, so how could something have happened? When they entered the room, they saw Len Ruoxue leisurely sitting on the chair, drinking tea and eating snacks. Feng Chuan was like a boneless man, half lying on the chair and eating melon seeds. Both of them looked relaxed, but the one who was not relaxed was the shivering innkeeper and a few waiters who knelt in front of them. What was this situation? Ming Ji blinked, waiting for Len Ruoxue to answer his question. These little bugs wanted to drug us and knock us out. Feng Chuan kindly answered Ming Ji's question. So, how do you plan to deal with them? Ming Ji asked, nodding. If someone wanted to die, no one could stop him. Ming Ji did not sympathize with them at all. It would be a waste of the resources of the Netherworld prison if such a blind person were to live. It was better to die. When you come back, you'll have a taste of your own medicine. Feng Chuan still answered. Oh. This meant that he was going to drug them too. At this moment, Len Ruoxue threw a few jade bottles to Ming Ji and said, I'll leave this job to you. All right. Ming Ji worked as a coolie without complaint. After distributing the pills in the jade bottles equally to the shopkeeper and several waiters, he did not have the mood to check the effects of the pills on these people, and directly threw them out of the window. Seeing his action, Len Ruoxue's eyes lit up. This move was the signature move of the evildoer. Copyright infringement. This is copyright infringement. At the thought of this, Len Ruoxue could not help but laugh evilly. Minga, you're really a ruthless man. I can't believe I gave them so many bottles of pills. Shouldn't I? Ming Ji blinked. She didn't understand. Eating one of each is already enough for them. After eating so many, even the Lord of the Dead Sea can't save them. AI. What a pitiful man. Len Ruoxue said sympathetically. Minga was speechless. Little girl, you're just adding insult to injury. Do you have to be so happy? She thought. Ming Ji was worried. Why did he feel that his hair had turned white after being with Leng Ruoxue for so long? This girl was really too evil. However, Ming Ji was in a good mood, so she quickly calmed down and said seriously, I didn't hear any news about my lord. He was probably sealed off by the Death Sea Master. Is this demon here to meet the Master of the Death Sea or someone else? Leng Ruoxue suddenly asked. The Master of the Death Sea. Ming Ji said honestly. Since things had come to this, there was no point in hiding it from Leng Ruoxue. Besides, he was also a little worried about his lord, because they had lost contact with her for a long time. The Master of the Death Sea is a woman? Leng Ruoxue asked through gritted teeth. Ah. This. I don't know how to put it. Leng Ruoxue's question put Ming Ji in a difficult position. You don't know what to say. That's it. Leng Ruoxue gritted her teeth. She was filled with hatred. After she found that demon, she would kill her way into the Death Sea Master's lair and kill that woman. Humph. Daring to seduce her man, if she wasn't courting death, what was she? Although she knew that the evildoer would not betray her, he had come to see another woman behind her back. This was also unforgivable. In her heart, Leng Ruoxue was calculating if she should create some of Leng Ruoxue's 10 great tortures and see if he would still dare to act on his own in the future. Hearing Leng Ruoxue's words and seeing that she was silent and thinking of some bad idea, Ming Ji was worried again. He didn't mean it that way. Sob. Why did this bad girl twist his words? It was a pity that he really did not know how to explain to Leng Ruoxue about the Master of the Dead Sea's identity. That fellow's background was rather complicated. The gender was the same. However, he was not sure what Leng Ruoxue was thinking. Otherwise, no matter how hard it was for him to say it, he would have explained it to Leng Ruoxue. And because he did not make it clear, Leng Ruoxue immediately identified the Master of the Death Sea as a mistress who was trying to seduce the evildoer. In this way, those extremely evil and wicked people who had settled in the Death Sea would be in deep trouble. In the next few days, Ming Ji went out to gather information as usual, and the inn was much more peaceful because of the tragic experience of the shopkeeper and the waiters. At the very least, many people who were envious of Leng Ruoxue and Feng Chuan had temporarily stopped. It was a pity that Ming Song had not found anything. He had even snuck into the Lord of the Dead Sea's city lord's residence, but the Lord of the Dead Sea was not there. Ming Ji was even more worried about his lord. Leng Ruoxue was also furious when she found out that the Master of the Dead Sea was not in the city lord's mansion. After some thought, she said to Ming Ji in a calm and collected manner, I've thought of a way to force out the Master of the Death Sea. Chapter 25-32, The End of the Dead Sea, 1. These words made Ming Ji's eyes widen instantly. That. Could he say that they only needed to find out news about their lord and that they didn't need to find a way to force the Death Sea Master out? That old pervert wasn't someone to be trifled with. If he could, even if he had to pay for it, he wouldn't want to fight with the other party. It was too much of a scam. In addition, he was not that old thing's match. This was what made him feel the most worried. However, Ming Ji would rather die than let Leng Ruoxue know about this, because it would really hurt a man's self-esteem. Young Lady Leng, It's best if we don't force the Master of the Dead Sea out. After thinking for a while, Ming Ji said in a very reserved manner. However, his words, which were about his reputation, caused Leng Ruoxue to misunderstand. She thought that he was protecting the evil third party who wanted to snatch the evil woman away. So, almost instantly, Leng Ruoxue burst out in anger, Why? You want to protect her? What? Ming Ji didn't understand. What was this? Minga, you'd better think it through. Are you going to protect her or stand on my side? Swords have no eyes. It's not good to hurt your own people. Leng Ruoxue's words were a little threatening. Even if Ming Ji's reaction was slow, he could sense that something was wrong. Miss Leng, why would I protect that guy? I'm doing this for your own good. Minga didn't even think about it and immediately expressed her feelings. Then let's work together to force that mistress out. Len Ruoxua gritted her teeth. Poor Ming Ge, he didn't understand what the mistress meant, but his conflicted expression, not knowing what to do, provoked Len Ruoxua. Then, she heard Len Ruoxua use a cold, eerie voice to threaten, either you come with me, or you get lost. I don't want someone who will drag us down. Ah! Why was he angry again? The pitiful Minga was once again at a loss. He felt that women were really hard to understand. He thought that he had already made his stand clear, so why did Len Ruoxua still treat him like this? My loyalty to Miss Len can be seen by the sun and the moon. After feeling wronged for a moment, Ming Ge promised again. Then stop talking nonsense. Well, start tomorrow. Len Ruoxua didn't want to give Ming Ge any more chances to betray her, so she cut to the chase. All right then. Although Ming Ge did not know what Len Ruoxua meant by take action, he had no choice but to compromise. If this little girl were to fly into a rage again, he would not be able to answer to his master. However, there was one thing he felt that he should tell Len Ruoxua first. Thinking about it this way, he said with some hesitation, Young Lady Leng, that I am not the master of the Dead Sea's match. So if there is any danger, you must run away quickly and don't worry about me. If it was possible, Ming Ge really didn't want to say this. But Len Ruoxua was so stubborn. He felt that if he didn't say it, he might be regarded as her man, which was something he couldn't bear. But after saying it, he breathed a sigh of relief. What? After Ming Ge finished speaking, it was Len Ruoxua's turn to be conflicted. Had she misunderstood? If you're not the master of the Death Sea's match, why are you here? Len Ruoxua couldn't help but ask after some thought. Coming here and being able to defeat the master of the Dead Sea are two different things. Furthermore, we are here to look for you. Ming Ge reminded. Originally, according to his plan, he had no intention of alerting the master of the Dead Sea. However, this little girl in front of him was too violent and impatient. It had only been a few days and she couldn't bear it anymore. He was also quite helpless about this. Ah! Are you trying to say that you have no intention of disturbing the master of the Death Sea? Len Ruoxua asked with uncertainty. Thanks, it can be considered so. That guy is very difficult to deal with. It's best not to provoke him if you can avoid calling him out, said Ming Ge with a nod. He thought that Len Ruoxua had finally realized that the local tyrant was not to be trifled with. Just as he was about to express his relief, he heard Len Ruoxua say, what if I have to provoke her? Such a topic gradually drove Minga mad. Woo, how could he refuse to answer such a question? The answer was yes. However, if he refused to answer, Len Ruoxua would take it as a silent agreement. As expected, seeing that Ming Ge was at a loss for words, Len Ruoxua continued to nod, I understand. The scale of our operation cannot be small, we must force the master of the Death Sea out. Now, Ming Ge didn't need to say anything. Seeing Len Ruoxua clench her fists and get ready for a big fight, Ming Ge was quite worried. But what made him even more depressed was that Feng Chuan, who was standing beside him, did not help to stop her. Instead, he was also in high spirits. This was simply wishing for the world to be in chaos. After thinking that she had finished her discussion with Ming Ge, Len Ruoxua turned around and went back to her room. Feng Chuan looked at Ming Ge with sympathy and said, Brother, let's do our best to level the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea isn't that easy to level. If it was possible, this place wouldn't have been left here until now. Minga said helplessly. He knew that he could not stop that girl. Hee hee. With this perverted little girl, the Dead Sea is no different from paper. Believe me. Feng Chuan's confidence in Len Ruoxua was extraordinarily strong. Hearing this, Ming Ge really wanted to bang her head against the wall. Now was not the time to fan the flames, okay? However, before Ming Ge could persuade Feng Chuan to come to her side, he patted his butt and went back to sleep. The next morning, After breakfast, Ming Ji and Feng Chuan were dragged out of the inn by Leng Ruoxue. Although Ming Ji had no idea what Leng Ruoxue's so-called plan was, he had a bad feeling that someone was going to be in trouble. Just as Minga had expected, not long after they left the inn, the first group of people who were seeking death came to their door. These people were obviously from the same force, and they were naturally attracted to Leng Ruoxue's beauty. This time, Leng Ruoxue didn't want to waste her breath on them, and she didn't want to listen to their nonsense either. After giving the two of them a look, Leng Ruoxue immediately took action. The result was obvious. Without much effort, Leng Ruoxue and the other two completed their assault on the streets. No, it should be self-defense. Of course, they also deliberately left a few alive so that they could have the opportunity to go back and report. Those who were still alive naturally didn't let him down. They howled and ran away. Seeing this, Leng Ruoxue took out her own recliner and lay down calmly. Feng Chuan did the same thing. Other than the recliner, he also took out some food and tea. Seeing them like this, Ming Ji's mouth twitched. What was this? Did they come out for a picnic? As Minga thought about this, she was also keeping an eye on the people peeking at them from the corner of her eye. When they were fighting just now, these people had been watching from the side. After seeing them kill like fiends, although those people were scared away, they still didn't want to leave completely. How could it be so easy to take advantage of them? Ming Ji exuded cold air very naturally. Leng Ruoxue felt a little cold, so she lit a brazier and placed it beside her to keep warm. Chapter 25-33, Doomsday of the Dead Sea, 2, Ming Ji was speechless. However, he didn't struggle for long before he saw that the few people who had just run away had indeed brought a large number of people to die. Laughing coldly in his heart, Minga took the lead and rushed forward. His sudden attack had thrown the enemy's formation into disarray. According to the enemy's plan, they had brought so many people to overwhelm Leng Ruoxue's group of 3 with their imposing manner. Unfortunately, they did not even have the chance to perform as Ming Ji had directly destroyed their deployment. When the formation was in chaos, people naturally panicked. Especially when they saw Ming Ji's godlike aura, many people were frightened. The timid ones wanted to escape, but unfortunately, their path was blocked by the seemingly calm Feng Chuan. Feng Chuan also didn't say anything and directly spat out the southern spirit Li fire. In an instant, countless people turned into a sea of fire. Arg! A demon! Hurry, hurry up and run! The sounds of noise, chaos, and wails rang out one after another, turning the originally spacious street into a mess. Leng Ruoxue couldn't help but find it funny when she heard herself and the rest being called demons. Weren't the people here all extremely vicious and evil, villains who killed without even blinking? He actually had the nerve to call them demons? Was there a mistake? With a faint smile, Leng Ruoxue stood up as well. When many people saw Leng Ruoxue move, they suddenly recalled that there was a hostage here. They had been so scared by Ming Ji and Feng Chuan that they had almost forgotten that there was a soft girl here. With this thought, many people immediately pounced towards Leng Ruoxue, wanting to take her as a hostage. It was a pity that when Leng Ruoxue got close to them, they realized that they had miscalculated. It was true that the other party was a soft girl, but it depended on who they were up against. To them, Leng Ruoxue was comparable to a female T-Rex. In the blink of an eye, after Leng Ruoxue made her move, they did not even have the chance to sense the arrival of the god of death before they were all dead. After killing another group of people, Leng Ruoxue and Feng Chuan returned to their old ways. Seeing this, Ming Ji no longer stood there stupidly. However, he didn't have a recliner, so he calmly went to a shop not far away and borrowed a chair. He said he was borrowing it, but as soon as the other party saw him, they immediately hid in fear, so Minga had to do it herself. The 3 of them sat in the middle of the street and chatted calmly. The people who were watching from afar had already sent the news back to their respective forces. They didn't know what the other party was thinking. In short, in the 2 hours they had been chatting, they didn't even see a figure who came to provoke them. Miss Leng, Are we just going to sit here like monkeys and let people watch us? After sitting there for a long time, Ming Ji was a little unsettled. You're tired? Leng Ruoxue lifted her eyelids and said with an understanding look. A little. Minga nodded helplessly. That wasn't the main point, okay? Then let's take the initiative to attack. Leng Ruoxue suddenly said. Initially, she thought that the people here would be more courageous. With such a good bait like her, many people would take the bait. Who knew that a few hours had passed and no one dared to have any ideas about them? This really disappointed her. Take the initiative to attack. Hearing this, Ming Ji was shocked. Did it mean what it said? There was still some other meaning. Yes, take the initiative to attack. Leng Ruoxue gave Feng Chuan a look. Feng Chuan obediently took out a piece of paper, and it was full of words. Thanks. Minga took it and looked at it curiously, and she was suddenly a little confused. Isn't this the list of all the major powers in the Dead Sea? When did they get it? Why didn't he know about it? This was written by the innkeeper for me. He was afraid that I would offend them in the Dead Sea, so he said that there are still good people in the Dead Sea. Leng Ruoxue praised. A good person? No way. The inn manager wasn't that kind. They probably had no choice but to submit to Leng Ruoxue's tyranny. However, when he saw Leng Ruoxue take out the list of the major powers in the Dead Sea, he more or less had an idea of what was going on. After silently mourning for the various forces of the Dead Sea, Ming Ji made an expression of risking her life to accompany a gentleman and said, "Where do you want to go first? How about we split up?" Leng Ruoxue raised her eyebrows and looked at Ming Ji. Well, Ming Ji hesitated. He was not very willing to do so. If Leng Ruoxue was not in front of him, he would not be at ease. Even though he had only spent a short time with Leng Ruoxue, he was very clear that Leng Ruoxue had a constitution that would definitely cause trouble. Unfortunately, his opinion did not matter to Leng Ruoxue at all. With a thought, Leng Ruoxue moved Uncle Dragon, the others, and the Abyss Dragons out of the house. After regaining their freedom, Uncle Dragon, the others, and the Abyss Dragons were moved to tears. They had only spent a few days together, but they had already formed a revolutionary friendship. In the next second, the human and the dragon hugged each other tightly. Ugh! To be more precise, Uncle Dragon and the others were being carried by the enormous netherworms. Seeing this scene, Ming Ji's face darkened, and the corners of his mouth twitched uncontrollably. After being with Leng Ruoxue and the others for so long, it seemed that nothing was new to him. However, their lively actions frightened the scouts who were watching them from a distance. Some spies had already sent the news back to their forces. Pay attention. Attention. Emergency alert. Azura's team had expanded again. I don't know where, but a lot of people appeared out of nowhere, as well as several dozen well-behaved netherworms. They seem to be quite close, and they're currently hugging each other. Uncle Dragon, the others, and the netherworms were all quite powerful. Although the spy who had sent the message had thought that he had spoken as quietly as possible, they had still heard everything clearly. In an instant, the faces of Uncle Dragon, the others, and the netherworms all darkened. Looking at this comical scene, Minga didn't know whether to laugh or cry. However, he didn't stop the furious Uncle Long and the others. Instead, he gloated at them. Uncle can endure it, but Aunt can't. Unwilling to be laughed at, Uncle Dragon and the other netherworms all pounced toward the scouts in the distance. In an instant, dozens of meters away, it was bustling with activity. As for the spies of the various major factions, they were naturally no match for the brutal Uncle Dragon and the other netherworms. They didn't even have a chance to struggle before they were all annihilated. Uncle Long and the others were still angry after this. Seeing this, Leng Ruoxue did not comfort him. Instead, she smiled and told Uncle Long and the others, "Uncle Long, let's split up and head to their respective lairs." "All right. Shuai knows us best. Hearing this, Uncle Dragon and the others all rubbed their fists and wiped their palms, while the netherworms all excitedly cawed and howled. These violent people. Why didn't he feel that these people had such violent tendencies when he was at the Joyo City Lord's mansion? Minga covered his face. He knew that his reputation would be ruined if he followed these people. Fortunately, this was the Dead Sea. Even if everyone here died, it wouldn't affect the 9 nether prison much. It was actually a good thing. But in this case, it was impossible not to alert the master of the Death Sea. However, Ming Ge knew that no one could stop these people now. If he didn't follow the other party, he would lose face. Therefore, he must not let the other party look down on him. Chapter 25-34, The End of the Dead Sea. 3. In order to prevent Ming Ge from feeling guilty for killing her fellow townsmen, Len Ruoxua kindly assigned Uncle Long and Dong Fangyu to him. She also assigned a few other Reverend God-level experts to Feng Chuan's side. She brought along some of the Grand Elder and the others who were slightly weaker and were obviously just there to watch the show. When Ming Ge saw this lineup, she was immediately discontented. Miss Leng, it's very unreasonable to divide it like this. Ming Ge protested. Who knew that Len Ruoxua would look at the situation of the 3 teams and nod her head in understanding? It's indeed unreasonable. With that, she took Feng Zhan out of the bracelet and said, Senior, you'll be in the same group as them and be in charge of dealing with the aftermath. The so-called aftermath was naturally to destroy the corpse and erase all traces. The old phoenix understood. Minga understood, and his mouth twitched again. He didn't mean it that way, okay? He was referring to the fact that his Reverend God-level strength was too strong. To put it bluntly, he was worried about Len Ruoxua. However, looking at Len Ruoxua's serious expression, Ming Ge was too embarrassed to say that she was playing dumb. Instead, it was Uncle Long who patted Ming Ge's shoulder comfortingly and said, Let's listen to Shuai'er's arrangements. Seeing Uncle Long's face, which clearly showed that he wanted him to accept his fate, Ming Ge was speechless. At this moment, the netherworms started making a fuss again. Boss! Boss! What about us? What are we doing? You guys do as you please. You can move freely. Len Ruoxua said after some thought. All right. Boss Nether Dragon nodded obediently. Let's go. Contact me at any time if you have any questions. After Len Ruoxua finished speaking, she gave Ming Ge a list of forces and left with the Great Elder and the others. We went that way. Feng Chuan pointed in the opposite direction of Len Ruoxua. All right. Ming Ge nodded, then led Uncle Long and Dong Fangyu down the last remaining path. After Len Ruoxua and the rest left, the Abyss Dragons stared at each other for a long time. One of the Abyss Dragons asked in a daze, Where are we going? Did Boss forget to give us a list of forces? We don't need a list of forces. Boss said that we can do whatever we want. Why don't we go to the City Lord's mansion to play? The netherworm boss suggested after scratching its head with its large claws. The City Lord's mansion. All right. Let's go to the City Lord's mansion. The Nether Dragons responded in unison. In any case, they knew that the Lord of the Dead Sea wasn't home. If they didn't go now, when would they? This was a great opportunity. After making their decision, the netherworms collectively flew toward the City Lord's mansion. After everyone split up, Len Ruoxua was the first to find the faction on the list. However, just as she walked to the entrance of the faction, the moment the guards at the entrance saw her, they immediately panicked and slammed the door shut. Following that, a roar came from inside, The killing god is here. Quickly close the door and release the boss. When Len Ruoxua, First Elder, and the rest heard this, they looked at each other with bright eyes. First Elder even said with an awkward expression, Shuai, your reputation is growing. Len Ruoxua didn't know how to respond to this, but Jiang Ning said with pride, that's right, Shuai's reputation is getting bigger and bigger, so we can't be too weak in the future, so just leave this battle to us. You can just go and search for their treasures. Thanks, are you sure? Len Ruoxiu's beautiful eyes lingered on the Grand Elder, Jiang Ning, Shen Nua, and the rest. The few non-combat type main force members were instantly enraged. Shuer, don't look down on us. We are also very strong. Jiang Ninghua roared. That's right. I'll let you experience it today. Shen Nua also said fiercely. Taking a look at the gentle and handsome Shen Nua, Len Ruoxiu was surprised to find that the children around her had all been corrupted. Furthermore, looking at their attitude, it was definitely not going to work if they did not take part in this battle. The helpless Len Ruoxiu could only agree to the words of the pill refiners and weapon refiners who were filled with battle intent. Seeing that Len Ruoxiu had given in, the Great Elder excitedly took out a small black ball and threw it into the door. Following that, the few of them who were calm and collected took a few steps back in unison. Following that, there was a loud explosion, and the door was shattered into pieces. Ah! When the people inside saw that their sturdy doors had been blown up, they became even more panicked. Especially when they saw Len Ruoxiu and her group approaching, the more timid ones were so scared that they retreated. At this moment, a person who looked like the boss shouted at the top of his voice, "Who are you people? How dare you come here and cause trouble?" That person was very angry, but the Azura's name was too famous. In less than an hour, it had spread throughout the entire Dead Sea. At first, he wanted to join forces with the other forces and find a chance to get rid of these people. Who knew that before he could even put it into action, they had already come to his door. Although the woman in front of him was very beautiful, he was not in the mood to admire her at this time, especially when this beauty was not to be trifled with. In a situation where he could lose his life if he was not careful, he could not just be greedy for her beauty. Therefore, when he shouted these words, it could be said that he had mustered up enough courage. If the beauty could be attracted by his domineering aura, that would be the best. Even if he couldn't, he had to let this woman know that fighting was a man's business. It was fine as long as a woman knew how to warm the bed and give birth. The leader of a certain force was fantasizing in her heart that Len Ruoxiu had green vessel to inform her. The thoughts of the man in front of her who was only pretending to be strong but was actually a weakling could not be hidden from her. Hence, she said nonchalantly, "If I don't cause trouble, why would I come to your place? He couldn't have come to see you, right?" You, the leader of the faction, who was not very eloquent, was so angry that he was at a loss for words. He pointed at Len Ruoxiu for a long time, but he could not form a complete sentence. Jiang Ning saw that he had been at a loss for words for a long time, so he lost his patience and threw a few dark gray pills at him. Before he could react, the dark gray pills on the ground turned into a light smoke and blended into the air. "Damn it, can't you say something before you attack?" Seeing this, the first elder angrily said as he hurriedly stuffed a pill into his mouth. He. I'm an impetuous person." Jiang Ning laughed evilly. The opponent was depressed when he heard them dumbfounded. What was going on? What were those pills just now? Don't blame them for being ignorant and ill-informed, it was really because their knowledge of medicinal pills was too little. They had no idea that there was a kind of medicinal pill in the world called poison pill. Very quickly, the other party was hit. In the beginning, it was as if there were ants crawling all over their bodies. It was extremely itchy and hard to resist. At this moment, they couldn't care less about Len Ruoxiu and the others in front of them. They focused on tickling them. When they finally managed to get over it, their bodies were burning as if they were on fire. Fuck! What's going on? Damn it, what the hell is this? The opponent who was hit started to curse. Len Ruoxiu observed the situation and could only say, "Do it. Give them a quick death." "All right." Jiang Ning agreed without hesitation. Then, he threw out a few more pills. Len Ruoxiu watched as the people in front of her fell to the ground without even having the chance to fight back. Then, she saw with her own eyes how the skin of her opponents, who had originally been smooth and full, gradually shriveled up. Very quickly, her opponents, who looked like dead tree bark, had turned into white bones. In the end, even their bones had been crushed into dust and scattered with the wind. Chapter 25-35, Beauty, do you want to save him? 1. The corners of Leng Ruoxu's mouth twitched. Was this a new poison that they had invented? It was indeed powerful. Hee. Schwer, we did well, right? Jiang Ning looked at Leng Ruoxua arrogantly. Not bad. You guys continue, I'll deal with the aftermath. After Leng Ruoxua finished speaking, she turned around and left. The place she was going to was the treasure room of this force. By the time Leng Ruoxua was done with her own matters and returned to the front yard, the Grand Elder and the others were already waiting for her. Jiang Ning reported to her with a fawning expression, Schwer, I've cleaned everything up. I guarantee that no fish has escaped the net. All right. We've gotten rid of the evil in the netherworld prison. Leng Ruoxua said with a look of righteousness. After getting rid of this force, they continued to move without stopping. Although many people in their team were not combat-oriented talents, they were the fastest to take care of their opponents. They even made their opponents unable to fight back. They also adhered to humanitarian principles and tried to kill them in a way that made them feel no pain. As Leng Ruoxua and the others acted too quickly, the organizations that were targeted did not even have the chance to pass on the news to their allies before they were completely annihilated. In less than half a day, the force that Leng Ruoxua was in charge of had completely disappeared from the face of the earth. After finishing their own work, they moved the battlefield to help Feng Chuan. Who knew that once Feng Chuan saw them, he would be so protective of his food and even recommend them to help Ming Ji. When they reached Ming Ji, Leng Ruoxua helplessly realized that Uncle Long and the others, who were having fun, didn't seem to welcome them. Why don't we go to the City Lord's mansion? Leng Ruoxua suggested. The City Lord's mansion? The City Lord isn't in the mansion, why are we going there? Jiang Ning was a little confused. He wasn't very interested in things like the City Lord's mansion. There should be a lot of good things in the City Lord's mansion. There might even be some precious herbs. Leng Ruoxua mumbled to herself. Hearing this, Jiang Ning and the others immediately agreed, let's go to the City Lord's mansion. Although the 9 Nether prison didn't produce alchemists, there were many medicinal herbs that could be used in medicine. Although most of them were not edible by ordinary people, they rarely made medicinal pills for ordinary people. Therefore, the herbs here were just what they wanted. Leng Ruoxua knew that the temptation of the herbs was greater than the heavens to them. Using the herbs to lure them was the best method. However, when they really arrived at the City Lord's mansion, they realized that the City Lord's mansion's territory had also been occupied. The netherworms were wreaking havoc in the City Lord's manor, having a lot of fun. Thanks, the entire City Lord's mansion was in a state of high alert. Under the leadership of the City Lord's mansion's chief butler, the guards in the mansion were trying their best to defend themselves in an extremely embarrassing manner. Why did the guards of the City Lord's mansion only defend and not attack? They had to mention the matter that made them extremely sad and angry. To put it simply, the skin of the abyss dragons was too thick, and they couldn't move them. However, when the abyss dragons swung their long tails, all of them had excellent aim, and it was guaranteed that they would hit them. In addition, the bodies of these abyss dragons were as large as small mountains, and the originally not-so-small City Lord's manor was instantly filled up by them. No matter where they ran, they would encounter abyss dragons with lecherous smiles, making it impossible for them to avoid them. It was as if the abyss dragons were deliberately toying with them. Their long tails swung back and forth in the air, but they did not kill them, causing their hearts to jump to their throats. This feeling was quite unpleasant, and after dodging back and forth a few times, their hair was in a mess, their clothes were in a mess, and they were panting. In short, everyone in the City Lord's manor, from the butlers to the guards and servants, was in an extremely sorry state. Damn it! Can you guys be more serious? It was unknown who it was, but someone couldn't take it and shouted. Leng Ruoxua and the others heard a cheap voice reply, of course not. We can't play you to death so easily. Leng Ruoxua understood the abyss dragon's meaning. They were simply saying that they only treated them as toys, so they couldn't let them die too quickly. The underlying meaning of the abyss dragon's words caused Leng Ruoxia's forehead to be filled with black lines. She had always thought that these abyss dragons were still considered innocent. Why was it that now? The Grand Elder and the others understood the netherworm's thoughts as well. They turned to look at Leng Ruoxia in unison. Although they did not say anything, their eyes clearly expressed their thoughts. Schwer, you've led the netherworms astray. Leng Ruoxia had been wronged. She felt even more wronged than Do Yi. She had to find a way to clear her name. However, she had to find an unlucky guy to vent her anger first. With this thought in mind, Leng Ruoxia glanced at a middle-aged man who was the closest to her. Not only was this middle-aged man short, but he also had a very wretched appearance. In order to express the anger in his heart, the middle-aged man was jumping up and down, waving his fists and cursing. It's you. Leng Ruoxia made up her mind. Uncivilized people should be eliminated first. In the next moment, a small flame floated away from Leng Ruoxia's fingertips. The small flame did not attract anyone's attention other than causing the temperature to rise instantly. It was only when the small flame floated to the front of the target's clothes and lit it that the middle-aged man and the people beside him came to a sudden realization. Head butler, you're on fire. Arg! Put out the fire. Quickly put out the fire. The scene was in chaos again. Leng Ruoxia had not expected that the target she had chosen was actually the city lord's residence's head butler. Oh. All right. To capture the bandits, first capture the leader. Since the master of the Dead Sea was not around, then he would start with this head butler. The people around the chief steward helped to put out the fire. However, those people were getting more and more busy. Not only did the fire on the chief steward not be put out, but the people who put out the fire also caught on fire. This time, the scene became even more chaotic. Hey, race the water. The water's here. At this moment, someone shouted. Then, a bucket of water was poured on the chief butler and the others. With the help of the water, the fire did not die out, but instead became more intense. This time, everyone was dumbfounded, including the netherworms. However, their thoughts were different from those of the city lord's mansion. They thought to themselves in an extremely depressed manner, boss is here. There's no end to this. Woo! The abyss dragons looked in the direction of Leng Ruoxia and the others, feeling extremely wronged. They gave Leng Ruoxia a resentful look. Then, they hardened their hearts and attacked from the left and right with their large tails. Whether it was those whose bodies were on fire or those who were helping to extinguish the fire, they were all whipped into the air by their furious tails. In the air, the people who were on fire quickly turned into smoke and disappeared. The lucky survivors were thrown into the air, but before they could stabilize themselves, they fell again. Unfortunately, the netherworms caught them with their tails, and soon, they were thrown high up into the air again. This cycle repeated for a long time, and the survivors began to foam at the mouth. Those who had a little bit of consciousness couldn't bear it anymore and shouted, "You evil demons, just give us a quick death. Don't even think about it." Boss Netherworm said viciously. These two words instantly shattered all the hopes of the survivors. Their hearts were instantly filled with despair. Chapter 2536, Beauty, do you want to save him? 2. After that, the netherworms continued to play their games. Leng Ruoxia was helpless and could only let them be. Not long after, Ming Ji, Feng Chuan, and the others, who had completed their mission, also came to the city lord's mansion. Seeing the mess in the city lord's mansion, Ming Ji was so surprised that she couldn't even close her mouth. He had to admit that he had underestimated the destructive power of Leng Ruoxia and the others. These people were simply the killing gods among the killing gods, the fighter planes among the killing gods. Young Miss Leng, that. Have you been to the city lord's mansion's treasure room? Minga didn't know what she should do, so she could only chat casually. I haven tea. Go now. Only then did Leng Ruoxia remember that she had been too engrossed in watching the show and had actually thrown the most important thing to the back of her mind. She was really unprofessional. After she finished speaking, under Qing Ju's guidance, Leng Ruoxue led the group of curious people to the city lord's mansion's treasure vault. Seeing how familiar Leng Ruoxue was with the city lord's mansion, Ming Ji was amazed along the way. She couldn't help but sigh in her heart. It seemed that this little girl had many tricks up her sleeve. Until Leng Ruoxue pointed to an unremarkable wooden door and said, "We're here." His eyes widened again. "Miss Leng, are you sure this is the place?" Ming Ji blinked, and blinked again. He couldn't believe that this was the place where the master of the Dead Sea kept his treasures. He wouldn't even believe that this was a warehouse. Of course. Leng Ruoxue was full of confidence. Qing Ju's senses were definitely not wrong. Qing Ju had even told her that there would be a surprise here. Leng Ruoxue's curiosity was piqued. She was in no hurry to find out what the surprise Qing Ju was talking about was, so she pushed the door open. Not locked? Leng Ruoxue trusted Qing Ju's judgment and knew that this place could not possibly be a trap. This could only mean that the master of the Dead Sea was too arrogant and thought that no one would dare to enter his city lord residence, and that he would definitely not close his doors at night. If this was the case, the Death Sea master would probably regret it so much that his intestines would turn green. Leng Ruoxue chuckled to herself. She pushed the door open and was about to enter when she was stopped by Ming Ji, who had a cautious look on his face. "Wait, don't be rash." After saying that, Ming Ji released a trace of dark power into the door. After a long time. Seeing that there was nothing unusual in the door, Ming Ji finally felt relieved and said, "Go in. There shouldn't be any danger." "Thank you." Leng Ruoxue was a little speechless. Of course, she knew that there was no danger. However, she still had to thank him for his kind intentions. After walking through the small door, there was indeed a warehouse. However, this warehouse was not a normal warehouse because it contained the many years of collection of the Dead Sea Master. There were all the precious ores and medicinal herbs that the First Elder and Shen Nua had considered as valuable. It was a pity that they were all piled on the ground like trash. When the First Elder, Shen Nua, and the rest saw them, they immediately pounced over with heartache. What a waste! It was really a waste of God's gift. How could such a good thing be piled up like garbage? After the First Elder, Shen Nua, and the rest pounced forward, they did not think about anything else and immediately stored the ores and medicinal herbs into their storage rings. Leng Ruoxue's beautiful eyes searched around, wanting to find the surprise that Qing Ju had mentioned. Thanks. Just as Leng Ruoxue was looking left and right, she suddenly heard a roar, "Don't act rashly, or I'll kill him." Hearing this voice, Leng Ruoxue immediately turned around and saw that Jiang Ning was being held as a hostage by a man in black. A shiny knife was placed on Jiang Ning's neck. As for the person who was holding on to Jiang Ning, she found him familiar. Heaven-breaking. Uncle Long recognized the person and reminded Leng Ruoxue. "You're actually not dead yet?" Leng Ruoxue asked in disbelief. Wasn't this guy sent to the Nine Nether prison by the evildoer to be taken care of? Why did he appear in the Dead Sea City? "Beauty, do you want me to die so much? I've missed you so much these days. I can't live without you for even one day." Patian gritted his teeth and glared at Leng Ruoxue like a venomous snake. His feelings towards Leng Ruoxue were rather complicated. He could not wait to tear Leng Ruoxue into pieces, but at the same time, he wanted to make her his. However, when he saw Leng Ruoxue now, he was reminded of the humiliation he had suffered in this godforsaken place. Thus, for a moment, his hatred for Leng Ruoxue prevailed. "I see. Then don't think about me," Leng Ruoxue said with a smile after listening to Patian. "Beauty, do you really think so? Unfortunately, I won't be able to fulfill your wish." Patian laughed maniacally as if he had just done something great. Leng Ruoxue was speechless. Then, Patian pointed at Jiang Ning, who he had caught, and said, "Beauty, do you want to save him?" "I don't." Leng Ruoxue did not hesitate at all and went straight to the point. Patian didn't expect Leng Ruoxue to answer so readily. He choked on his words and swallowed the rest of his words. Beauty, how can you be so heartless? Isn't he your friend? Patian was so angry that he was grinding his teeth. However, Len Ruoshua still put on an indifferent look and smiled faintly. You're wrong, he's not my friend, he's a rice weevil. If you want him, just take it. I can save a lot of food by taking care of one less person. Yup. There won't be anyone snatching herbs from me in the future. Shen Noa also echoed. When Jiang Ning heard their words, he put on a depressed expression and said, I knew you've long despised me. Warrior, why don't you take me away? Although I can eat a little, seeing how wise and powerful you are, you shouldn't let me go hungry, right? I'm an alchemist. As long as you can provide me with enough herbs, I can refine pills for you. How about it? It'll be very useful. Don't hesitate anymore. Yeah. That's right. Hurry up and take this guy away. We're giving him to you. The great elder and the others continued to jeer, all of them putting on an indifferent expression. Seeing them like this, Ming Ji's mouth twitched. Were these people really together? Why did it sound like he was sending the god of plague away? However, he was still quite surprised to be able to meet familiar faces from Len Ruoshua and the others in the Master of the Dead Sea's treasure vault. You guys, Patian was so angry that he was about to explode. Although these people were talking non-stop, what they were expressing was that he should take the hostage away quickly. This fact made him extremely depressed. He couldn't help but wonder if he had caught the wrong person. So what if the other party was an alchemist? What he wanted now was not alchemists, but a heavyweight hostage so that he could escape from the hands of these people. But now, it seemed that his idea had become an extravagant hope. No. He wasn't willing to surrender. Originally, he had hidden here in the hope of avoiding the netherworm's pursuit. He did not expect to encounter Len Ruoshua and the others. These fellows were definitely more difficult to deal with than the netherworms, and were even more terrifying. Potion's mind whirred, and then he made up his mind. The knife in his hand moved closer to Jiang Ning's neck, and he threatened, You really don't care about his life? Chapter 2537, Beauty, do you want to save him? 3. Didn't I tell you? Len Ruoxu's face was filled with helplessness. You think he'll believe you? Patian sneered. Then what do you want? Len Ruoshua was tormented by him to the point where she could not even get angry. You guys make way, I'm leaving. Patian's eyes turned and he suddenly said. Len Ruoshua and the rest were stunned when they heard Patian changing the topic. Don't tell them that this fellow had captured a hostage just so he could escape this place smoothly. If that was the case, they would be greatly disappointed. However, the truth was cruel. That was the original intention of Patian to capture the hostage. However, after Len Ruoshua and the others' performance, he no longer had any hope for the hostage. On the contrary, the hostage had become a burden to him. He was afraid that Len Ruoshua and the others would make a move on him at any moment. If that happened, he would be in an even more passive position. All right. Well, let you leave. It's not a big deal. Len Ruoshua said nonchalantly. Then, she gave Uncle Long and the others a look, and they immediately made way for her. You can leave. We won't do anything to you. Len Ruoshua declared. You guys aren't going to let me go on purpose and then launch a sneak attack, are you? Puotian was not at ease with Len Ruoxua's generosity. You're thinking too much. We're both from the divine realm, after all. After coming to this unfamiliar place, isn't it only right for us to help each other? Len Ruoshua replied matter-of-factly. You're tactful. Patian believed Len Ruoxua's sincerity. However, out of caution, he still took Jiang Ning as a hostage. It wasn't until Ping An reached the door that he threw Jiang Ning away and fled the place like an arrow. After being left behind, Jiang Ning looked at Len Ruoshua and the rest with a guilty look. I'm sorry, I'm too useless. It's good that you know. Len Ruoshua said with a straight face on purpose. She wasn't used to Jiang Ning's sudden apology. However, the next second, she saw Jiang Ning smiling as if nothing had happened. Hee hee. I knew you would say that. How can a dignified alchemist like me be useless? Hearing this, Leng Ruoxue felt helpless. She knew that Jiang Ning's apology wasn't sincere. Luckily, she didn't take it seriously. Otherwise, she would have been infuriated. Uncle Long and the others knew what kind of person Jiang Ning was. So, they just sighed and ignored him. They continued to work. On the other hand, Ming Ji had no idea how they interacted with each other. His eyes were wide open as he stared at Jiang Ning in disbelief. Then, he turned to look at Leng Ruoxue. He felt that he had grown up. None of these people are normal. He also sighed and then asked carefully, Miss Leng, are we just going to let that Petion leave like this? Ming Ji did not expect to see a man from the divine realm here, and it seemed that he had a grudge against Leng Ruoxue and the others. This was really beyond his expectations. However, before Leng Ruoxue could answer, Ming Ji heard a scream from outside. It sounded like the one who broke the sky. Ugh! He felt like he understood. He knew that that person would not leave so easily. As he thought of this, he looked at Leng Ruoxue and the rest with a strange look in his eyes. However, Leng Ruoxue and the rest were still as calm as ever. Jiang Ning even smiled happily and said, "Humph. How dare he take me as a hostage? I'll let him know why the flowers are so red." Thanks. Minga silently mourned for the heaven breaker for 3 minutes to show her kindness. Yes, compared to these people, I'm really too kind. It was wrong. It should be said that compared to them, the people of Nine Nether Prison were too kind. After witnessing so many things with his own eyes, Ming Ji immediately raised the status of Leng Ruoxue and the others in his heart to the point that they were only second to his lord in his heart. At the same time, he secretly made a decision that no matter what happened, he would stand firmly on the side of these people. These people were too terrifying. Leng Ruoxue and the others had finished packing up the items in the treasure vault. Seeing that Ming Ji was in a daze, they did not disturb him. Uncle Long held the dazed Ming Ji's hand and left with the rest. Outside, the netherworms were almost done playing. The surviving guards and attendants of the city lord's mansion were all on their last breath after being played by them, while the more active ones were Skypiercer. Even though he was already being held by the netherworm's large claws, he was still like a person with ADHD. Seeing him like this, Leng Ruoxue knew that it was Jiang Ning's doing. Jiang Ning also smiled and moved closer to Padian. He first gave him a hard kick and then said fiercely, "You bastard! How dare you take me as a hostage? Do you have any guts?" After saying that, Jiang Ning took out a handful of pills of different colors, opened Potion's mouth, and stuffed all the pills in his hand into it. "Boss, what should we do with these guys?" The Nether Dragon's heart trembled as he looked at Jiang Ning's actions in fear. He then asked for Leng Ruoxue's opinion. "Except for the Heaven Splitter, deal with them all," Leng Ruoxue said after some thought. The boss Netherworm responded, and then gave the other Netherworms a look. The Netherworms cried out again and nimbly leaped into the air, then fell from the air like cannonballs. Bang bang bang. After a few loud bangs, the guards and attendants of the city lord's mansion who were on their last breath finally closed their eyes in happiness. They were finally free. Leng Ruoxue could not help but cover her face when she saw this. She deeply regretted the violence of the Netherworms. She was definitely not the one who taught them how to deal with prisoners of war like this. After watching the Netherworm's actions, Ming Ji, who had finally managed to stop her wild thoughts, simply shut her mouth and stopped expressing her opinions. The mission has been completed. We can leave now. After the awkwardness, Leng Ruoxue said calmly. Yes, yes. The crowd responded immediately. Of course, before they left, Leng Ruoxue did not forget to light a fire for the city lord's residence. After the operation ended, the number of survivors in the Dead Sea City, other than Leng Ruoxue and her group, was less than 3 digits. These people were lucky enough to survive because they were staying in the shops or inns that guarded the main street. What happened to the various factions in the Dead Sea City was no longer a secret to them. For a time, the doors of all the shops were tightly closed. The Dead Sea City was filled with a dead aura, which made the already dark Dead Sea City even gloomier. When they returned to the inn, Len Ruoxue and the rest saw the innkeeper standing at the entrance, trembling as he welcomed them. They shot a glance at the ashen-faced innkeeper, but none of them bothered with him and went straight upstairs. When Len Ruoxue and the rest returned to their rooms, the innkeeper heaved a sigh of relief. It was only then that he realized that he had broken out in cold sweat, and his clothes had long since been drenched in sweat. No. He could not stay here and wait for death. The innkeeper quickly packed up his belongings and fled the inn without looking back. The inn manager ran all the way out of the Dead Sea City. Just as he was hesitating which path was the safest, a huge black shadow blocked his view. He looked up. Oh my God. Isn't that an abyss dragon? Chapter 2538, Beauty, do you want to save him? 4. What are you doing? The inn manager trembled as he spoke. His expression was like a little wife who was about to be snatched away. The abyss dragon glanced down at the inn manager and said with a nonchalant expression, "My boss said that you're only allowed to enter the Dead Sea City. So, you'll have to go back the way you came out." Woo! Lord Netherworm, why you should let me go. There's a terrifying killer god in the Dead Sea City. I can't stay here anymore. If you stay here any longer, you won't be able to keep your little life. The inn manager wailed and begged. Damn it, who's your uncle? Don't randomly claim relatives. Moreover, what does your life have to do with me? You people. Since they dared to live in the Dead Sea City, which one of them was not a wanted criminal who had experienced hundreds of battles and killed countless people? Now you're afraid. Why didn't you know fear when you were bullying others? Don't you know what the Wheel of Fortune is? I'm talking about you guys. The Netherworm roared. Although they were also brutal and bloodthirsty by nature, they would not kill the innocent. This was also the main reason why they could live well even though their hands were stained with blood. After all, the 9 Nether prison didn't restrict killing, but there was a limit. If they crossed the boundary, they would be wanted. As for the people of the Dead Sea City, although they were wanted by the courts of hell, they were still alive and kicking because they were under the protection of the Master of the Dead Sea. But now, I'm afraid even the Master of the Dead Sea can't save them. As the abyss dragon thought of this, it raised its tail high at the same time, throwing the crying inn manager back into the Dead Sea City. Unable to leave and unable to complain tearfully, the inn manager could only return to the inn with his tail between his legs. However, he was quite pleased that he was not the only one who received such treatment. In reality, they were thinking too much. Len Ruoxue's target was the various major factions in the Dead Sea City. At that time, they were not among the factions, so Len Ruoxue naturally would not attack them alone. It was a pity that they had done too many bad things and were extremely guilty. They were afraid that the other party would kill them all. Thus, they were so terrified that their hearts were in their throats. They did not know how many more days they could see the sun. At the same time, Nether Sword and the others had finally arrived at the Dead Sea City after a long and arduous journey. However, they were extremely nervous. When they entered the city, they suddenly realized that the situation they had expected did not happen. Dead Sea City was silent. When they saw that no one was collecting the entrance fee at the city gate, they were puzzled for a while. But now that they saw that there was no one breathing in the Dead Sea City, they were not only puzzled but also shocked. Thanks what happened? Nether Sword and the others' hearts sank. If Len Ruoxue and the others had not arrived, they naturally would not have to worry. However, when they thought about how they should have already arrived and how the Dead Sea City had such a scene, their hearts could not help but ache. He just couldn't let go. If Len Ruoxue were to lose even a single strand of hair, they did not dare to imagine the terrifying consequences. Nethersword and the others were burning with anxiety as they searched the city without restraint. Finally, they found a few people in a hidden corner who were trembling in fear like chicks that had just been hatched. After asking for the reason, Nether Sword and the others were all dumbfounded. A goddess of slaughter led a group of gods of slaughter and massacred all the major powers in the Dead Sea City? Did they hear wrong? The goddess of killing shouldn't be talking about the master of the Dead Sea. Could it be Len Ruoxue? When Nether Sword and the others first heard this news, their first reaction was disbelief. They were very clear about the power of the various forces in the Death Sea. In addition, with the support of the Master of the Death Sea, the evil forces were like fish in water. Just by stomping their feet on the Death Sea, it was enough to cause trouble for outsiders. Hence, they could not believe that the goddess of slaughter that these people were talking about was Len Ruoxue. Even now, the courts of hell had not been able to eradicate the various forces in the Death Sea. Could it be that Len Ruoxue had managed to do it in such a short period of time? In reality, what they didn't know was that it wasn't strange for Len Ruoxue to be able to do all this because she had too many tricks up her sleeve. On the other hand, they couldn't do it. Other than the hardware, if they really wanted to destroy the forces in the Death Sea, they would have to pay a huge price. The main reason was that all those forces were under the protection of the Master of the Death Sea. Naturally, the Master of the Death Sea would not just stand by and watch as the people from the courts of hell killed all his subordinates. However, the troublesome Master of the Death Sea was not around and Len Ruoxue and the others had many tricks up their sleeves. Thus, the major powers of the Death Sea were the unlucky ones. Furthermore, Len Ruoxue treated the Master of the Death Sea as a third party, so she would not show any mercy. With so many factors added together, Len Ruoxue had succeeded, but Nether Sword and the others were shocked. Using the clues they had, Nether Sword and the others found the inn where Len Ruoxue and the others were staying. They asked the inn manager, who was also trembling with fear, for the location of Len Ruoxue and the others' rooms before they went upstairs. It was Minga who opened the door. Seeing Nether Sword and the others, Ming Ji showed a rare smile. "You guys are so slow." These words made Nether Sword and the others feel indignant. However, the most important thing now was to confirm what they had heard. After greeting Len Ruoxue and the others, they pulled Ming Ji along to get to know each other. Chapter 2539, Master of the Death Sea, 1. After communicating with Ming Ji for a long time, Nether Sword and the others finally confirmed what they had heard. It was all true. Oh my god. The goddess of killing was actually Len Ruoxue. Such a fact still greatly agitated Minga and the others, who had already been mentally prepared. Woo-woo, why did they come so late? What if he missed the moment when the goddess of slaughter showed her might? From Ming Ji's description, they could already imagine how violent Len Ruoxue and the others were. However, they still felt regretful that they had not seen it with their own eyes. As such, they were filled with envy, jealousy, and hatred for Ming Ji, who had participated in the entire process. In fact, Ming Ji was also quite aggrieved. She even envied them for not being there at the time. If they weren't there, they wouldn't have been provoked. Could they imagine how depressed they were at that time? Minga truly felt that he was just a passerby, because Len Ruoxue and the others were much more violent than him. Unfortunately, they only heard the glory of his participation in the whole process, but they could not understand his feelings as a soy sauce. Minga sighed. If these people really participated, they wouldn't be envious of him, he promised. However, at this moment, Nether Sword and the others couldn't understand the truth of his idea. After hearing Ming Ji's retelling, Nether Sword and the others looked at Len Ruoxue and the others with burning eyes, as if they were dogs looking at a dog's bones. It made Len Ruoxue and the others' hair stand on end. Very quickly, Nether Sword and the rest stuck to Uncle Long and the others, insisting on getting closer to them. This was especially so after they saw Potion's misfortune. Alchemists like Jiang Ning and Xin Nua became their main targets. As for Len Ruoxue, they didn't dare to pester her. Len Ruoxue, who had nothing to do, saw that everyone was busy, so she could only go and find trouble. At this time, Patian was locked up in a guest room. Patian, who was tied up, was in an extremely sorry state. His body and face were covered in scratch marks, and his clothes were also torn and tattered. He had once been a handsome and elegant young master, but now he was no different from a beggar. When she saw Patian, Len Ruoxue first sized him up carefully. After expressing her sympathy, Len Ruoxue then said indifferently, "Patian, how are you?" "Very well, beauty. It won't be long before you'll be like me, a prisoner." Patian, who had his eyes closed, opened them after hearing Len Ruoxue's words. His eyes were spitting fire as he spoke fiercely. "A prisoner? Whose is it?" Len Ruoxue was curious when she heard this. "Ha ha ha. Of course, it belonged to the master of the Death Sea. So, you won't be able to be happy for long." Patian roared with grief and indignation. He was filled with hatred. He could have escaped, but who knew that the abyss dragons in the city lord's residence were in cahoots with Len Ruoxue? This fact almost drove him mad. "Are you sure that the master of the Death Sea can capture me?" Len Ruoxue blinked her eyes and continued to fish for information. "Of course, even the Dark Lord of the Nine Nether prison can't do anything to the master of the Dead Sea, much less you." "Ha ha ha." As he spoke, Puocean laughed wildly again. "You're so sure of my fate. It seems that I really can't kill you now. I have to keep you alive and let you see if I will become a prisoner of the master of the Dead Sea." Len Ruoxue said calmly. After she finished speaking, she gave Patian a meaningful look and turned to leave. In the next few days, the Dead Sea remained terrifyingly silent. Len Ruoxue even suspected if the master of the Death Sea had received the news. Why had he not appeared yet? She was getting a little impatient. Thanks Ming Ji wanted to tell her that the master of the Dead Sea must have received the news, but he would not be back for a while. He was sure that his lord had delayed the master of the Dead Sea. Otherwise, they would not have waited for so many days in vain. Len Ruoxue was also very stubborn. She would not leave until she saw the master of the Dead Sea. Actually, if it was possible, he really wanted to persuade Len Ruoxue to leave the Dead Sea city temporarily. However, whenever he faced Len Ruoxue, he would think of their group's violence, and he would not be able to say this no matter what. Furthermore, he was also worried about his lord and the others. If his guess was correct, his lord and the others should be with the master of the Dead Sea. AI. Master of the Dead Sea, hurry up and appear. Ming Ji believed that if the master of the Dead Sea could roll back in time, his master might also appear. That way, everyone would be happy. After Ming Ji thought it through, he waited for the Lord of the Dead Sea to appear every day. However, after waiting for several days, he still did not see the Lord of the Dead Sea. He could not help but feel a little disappointed. He was so furious that he rushed out of the inn and started to wreak havoc in the Dead Sea city. When Nether Sword and the others saw him like this, they only thought that he was mentally unstable. As he went crazy, the few shops in the Dead Sea city were instantly filled with holes and were in terrible condition. Many shops even collapsed directly, and the survivors hiding in the shops screamed and ran away like rats. For a time, the scene became chaotic again. Seeing this, Nether Sword and the others were also itching to fight. They specifically picked on the survivors who were running around, toying with them but not killing them, causing those survivors to be filled with grief and anger. "Woo-woo! Kill us!" Someone cried and shouted. Such days were really too painful. They couldn't take it anymore. Unfortunately, how could Nether Sword and the others be manipulated by others? Therefore, their wish could only become an extravagant hope. Nether Sword and the others chased after the few survivors like cats and mice. All of a sudden, dark clouds gathered above the Dead Sea city, and lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Thick black clouds churned and covered the entire Dead Sea city, causing the already dim Dead Sea city to turn pitch black as if it was a dark day. When Minga and the others saw this, they immediately became vigilant. They stopped what they were doing and maintained a vigilant posture. Len Ruoxue and the others were also attracted by the strange scene outside. Who has the guts to cause trouble in my Dead Sea city? At this moment, an unusually angry roar was heard by Leng Ruoxue and the others. That roar carried a powerful pressure, causing Leng Ruoxue and the rest to feel the pressure. Those who were slightly weaker immediately turned pale and felt a heavy pressure on their chests, as if a huge rock was pressing down on them. Ming Ji and the others felt that something was amiss. They immediately moved to Leng Ruoxue and the others' side and released their own pressure to block the attack for them. The Master of the Death Sea. Leng Ruoxue's beautiful eyes flashed as her mood lifted. The mistress had finally appeared. However, this mistress seemed to be very strong. Leng Ruoxue did not know if she could defeat her. I am the Master of the Death Sea. A tall, beautiful, and sexy woman appeared before everyone. Leng Ruoxue sized up the Master of the Death Sea and could not help but think she is indeed a beauty. Not only was her face beautiful, but her figure was also so hot that it was daunting. She looked at the other person's huge, shapely chest and then looked at her own. Leng Ruoxue was shocked to realize that she seemed to have an inferiority complex. More importantly, this Master of the Death Sea was not just a pretty face. He was a truly powerful expert. Her abilities were even above hers, so she had no confidence in going up against Leng Ruoxue. However, in order to defend her man's territory, she would never admit defeat. Chapter 2540 Master of the Death Sea, 2. At the same time, the Lord of the Death Sea's gaze landed on Leng Ruoxue. With one look, the Lord of the Death Sea was stunned beyond words. He did not expect such a beautiful woman to exist in this world. Looking at Leng Ruoxue, the Lord of the Death Sea said, "Beauty, how about you submit to me?" Leng Ruoxue's face was filled with black lines. Was she being teased? The one who was teasing her was a woman. Uncle Long and the others were also at a loss. Was it appropriate for a woman to flirt with another woman? Yield to her? How? In contrast to Leng Ruoxue and the rest, who were shocked, Ming Ji and the rest roared in anger, "You shameless lady boy, don't even think about our future Netherworld Empress. The Lord will not let you off." Master, he. He couldn't even protect himself now, how could he still care about the bowtie's safety? Beauty, give in to me. Big brother will definitely treat you well. The Death Sea Master said without a care. Initially, when Leng Ruoxue heard that the evildoer could not even save himself, she was extremely furious. However, when she heard the word brother, her nerves tensed up. What brother? Leng Ruoxue could not understand. However, she didn't think too much about it, because sometimes, she also called herself a lord in front of a demon. The woman in front of him was probably a queen. Otherwise, she wouldn't have called him brother in front of her. However, she wasn't interested in this brother of hers. At the thought of this, Leng Ruoxue smiled faintly and said, "Death Sea Master, do you think I will believe your words? I know better than you what kind of strength my man has. What a beauty! It's a good thing that you're so confident, but when you truly know my strength, you won't think this way anymore. So, while this lord hasn't gotten angry yet, quickly throw yourself into my arms." The Master of the Death Sea continued to tempt him without any anger. Don't even think about it. Leng Ruoxue was very stubborn. She had no interest in women. Right, don't even think about it. My master will definitely take care of you. Nether Sword also said angrily. He. It seems like you guys won't give up until you see the Dead Sea. Since you don't believe me, I'll show you the situation of the master you speak of. The Master of the Dead Sea laughed. As he finished speaking, a screen of light appeared in the pitch-black night sky. Following that, 3 young men appeared on the screen. Freak! Leng Ruoxue's eyes widened as she stared at the screen in disbelief. Besides my lord, Ming Ziyi and Mu Li City Master are also here. Nether Sword said. On the screen, the 3 of them were sitting on the ground in a circle. It was unknown what they were talking about, but it could be seen that the 3 of them looked quite depressed. Ha ha ha. Not bad. They're all here and they're my prisoners now. It won't be long before they're swallowed by my Death Sea water. At that time, you won't be able to see them anymore, and the 9 nether prison will be my world. The master of the Death Sea laughed maniacally as he looked at Len Ruoxue with eyes filled with determination. You're dreaming. As long as I'm here, 9 nether prison will never fall into your hands. Len Ruoxue was enraged. The consequences would be severe. However, the master of the Death Sea did not take Len Ruoxue's anger to heart. Instead, he chuckled and said, "Beauty, you're merely a divine emperor. I can crush you to death with a finger. What right do you have to be so confident? But don't worry, I can't bear to kill you. In the future, you'll still be the Nether Queen of the 9 nether prison, and I'll naturally be the Dark Lord. Thanks, keep daydreaming." Len Ruoxue laughed coldly. After she finished speaking, she attacked without a second thought. In an instant, a small flame turned into a ray of dark light and teleported towards the Master of the Dead Sea. When the Master of the Dead Sea saw how small the flame was, he thought that Len Ruoxue was just playing with him and did not take it seriously. However, when the flame actually burned her clothes, she felt that something was wrong. The flame was too hot. Damn it! The Death Sea Master felt a sharp pain from the burn. With a pull of her hand, she tore her clothes apart and a white naked body appeared in front of everyone. Then, she said with a perverted smile, "Beauty, if you want to see my naked body, just say it. Why set fire to it? Fuck." When Len Ruoxue heard this, she really wanted to curse. Not only that, but these words also made her feel a little familiar, because she seemed to have heard it from Potion's mouth. No wonder the two of them were together. However, he was also lucky to meet such a beautiful and sexy woman in the 9 nether prison. Len Ruoxue unceremoniously scanned the Master of the Dead Sea's body. Suddenly, she could not help but widen her eyes. What was that thing below the Death Sea Master's waist? Len Ruoxue suspected that her eyes were playing tricks on her. She pulled the nether sword, who was the closest to her, and asked with uncertainty, "Do you see that thing below her waist?" "Ah." Hearing this question, Nether Sword lowered his head in embarrassment. He didn't know how to answer. Uncle Long and the others quickly looked up at the sky to prevent Schwer from asking them. Actually, they had all seen the thing below the Death Sea Master's waist. When they first saw it, they were quite shocked. However, they immediately thought of the innocent Len Ruoxue. Hence, they acted as if nothing had happened, afraid that they would arouse Len Ruoxue's curiosity. However, things had already gone against their wishes, and Len Ruoxue still discovered it. "I'm asking you a question." Seeing that Nether Sword did not reply, Len Ruoxue gritted her teeth and said, "I see it." Nether Sword said in a low voice. "Isn't she a woman?" Len Ruoxue roared. These words were heard by everyone present, including the Master of the Death Sea. However, the Master of the Death Sea only smiled lewdly as if he was proud of it. "Beauty, I'll tell you. I can be a man and a woman whenever I want." "Ha, you must be envious." The Master of the Death Sea laughed complacently. "Envy, my ass. You lady boy." Len Ruoxue's heart felt as if there were thousands of alpacas galloping. This fact almost drove her crazy. Although in her previous world, transvestites were not rare, she had never seen one with her own eyes. Now that she had seen one, she only felt nauseated. No one actually told her that the Master of the Death Sea was a transvestite. Not only that, she was even teased by a transvestite. Really, Uncle can endure it, Aunt can't. The furious Len Ruoxue's white and tender fingertips suddenly had a few small flames dancing around them. Finally, the small flames merged together and formed a ball of fire the size of a baby's fist. In the next second, the ball of fire was thrown out by Len Ruoxue and it went straight for the Master of the Dead Sea. When the Dead Sea Lord saw the hot-tempered beauty set fire again, it would be a lie to say that she wasn't depressed. One must know that even though she was strong, she hated fire the most. However, the beauty in front of her was a frequent arsonist, so much so that she couldn't guard against it. This time, the temperature of the ball of fire was obviously much higher than the small flame last time, which made her a little angry. However, she, who was full of tender feelings for women, could not bear to lay her hands on such a beauty, so she could only hide.